Chapter 664. The Lin Family, Feng Province, Qi Kingdom. In a small courtyard, Li Yi squatted on the ground and fanned the fire gently. Mississippi Lu's medicine was simmering on the fire. The old man with the surname Lin was the doctor of the Lin family. After returning to the Lin mansion, he quickly sent someone to deliver some medicine. Li brothers, which part of the Jing kingdom are you from? The big man squatted on the side and chatted with Li Yi. He suddenly asked. Qing'an Prefecture. Li Yi replied casually. Qing'an Prefecture? That's so far away. The big man showed a hint of surprise and said, this time, you've almost passed through the whole Jing kingdom. It's quite far. Li Yi added more firewood and asked, Brother Lin, have you been to Qing'an Prefecture? The big man nodded and said, about half a year ago I went once with Mississippi. There's a Rui tavern in Qing'an Prefecture. The wine there is very strong and the brothel there. I have to say the drama in the Jing kingdom is much better than in the Qi kingdom. Brother Lin, do you often go to the Jing kingdom? Li Yi asked casually. The big man counted with his fingers and said, I don't go often. I go with Miss twice a year. Including this time it should be 4 times. Li Yi calculated the time and lowered the intensity of the fire a little. He thought of the seemingly gentle and weak woman and said, your family's young mistress is quite capable. Mrs. Amazing. The big man nodded and said, the Lin family's business depends on her. Otherwise, those good-for-nothings would have squandered all the family's assets. Mississippi Lu's medicine would be ready in a little more time. Li Yi simply sat there and chatted with the big man. The content was, of course, about the Lin family and the situation in Feng Province. The situation of the Lin family was also strange. The second generation of the family was all present, but they handed over the business of the entire family to such a weak girl. Of course, part of the reason was that Miss Lin's father had died early, and the eldest branch was only left with a weak woman and an underage younger brother. More importantly, she did have some kind of extraordinary talent in business. Just from the respect and admiration in this man's words, one could tell a thing or two. As for Feng Province, it was located far away from the capital city of the Qi kingdom and could be considered remote. However, its economic strength was not lagging behind at all. It was similar to how Qing'an Prefecture felt in the Jing kingdom. When he entered the city just now, Li Yi had also observed a little. In terms of prosperity, this place was at least 18 streets away from Xuzhou. Of course, the most important thing to him was another point. The more prosperous and affluent a place was, the less influence the Daoist nun had. Especially in such an important city, their so-called holy religion could not act unscrupulously. Otherwise, if the claim that they had 100,000 followers in the Qi kingdom was not an exaggeration, there might be 800 to thousands of them in Feng Province. It would really be a headache. The medicine is ready. Estimating that the time was up, Li Yi extinguished the fire and filtered out the medicine. He tasted a small mouthful and couldn't help but frown. He knew that Mississippi Lu was afraid of bitterness. Rui said that she had never touched bitter things since she was a child. How to make her drink this bowl of medicine was not a small problem. You go in. The big man stood up, waved his hand and said, I'll go to see Mississippi after a while. Li Yi walked in with the medicine. Seeing Mississippi Lu sitting cross-legged on the bed, he walked to the bedside and said, drink the medicine first. Mississippi Lu opened her eyes and looked at the black medicine. She shook her head and said, I'll take care of myself slowly. I don't need to drink medicine. Li Yi looked at her and said, drink it. It's not bitter. Mississippi Lu looked at him suspiciously. Li Yi said with a straight face, I just tasted it. It's not bitter at all. If you don't believe me, look. He picked up the bowl and drank a big mouthful. His expression did not change. Mississippi Lu took the bowl from his hand doubtfully. After tasting a small mouthful, her pretty face immediately frowned. She glared at him and said, you lied to me. Li Yi looked at her and said, good medicine tastes bitter. Drink it quickly. You'll feel better after drinking it and we can go back sooner. I won't drink it. Mississippi Lu put the bowl aside and glared at him for being lied to. She closed her eyes and continued to recuperate. Drink it. Drink it and I'll give you a piece of candy. Li Yi persuaded her. Mississippi Lu glanced at him and said, childish. 2 pieces. Give it to me first. In the meeting hall of the Lin family. More than 10 people were sitting in the hall. A woman named Lin Wanru sat at the bottom. She put a thick book on the table and said, "This is the account for this time. Please take a look." As soon as she finished speaking, a thin man stood up and said, "Little Ru, Lin Fong said that you encountered bandits on your way back. Is that true?" Lin Wanru nodded and said, "We did encounter a little trouble, but it was solved smoothly in the end." "What trouble?" A middle-aged man with a short beard frowned and said, "Didn't I tell you to follow the caravan of the Bai family this time? Why didn't you come back with them? You were lucky this time. What if you encountered a bigger danger?" "Second uncle, the Bai family is the Bai family and the Lin family is the Lin family." Lin Wanru looked at him and said, "Why do we have to follow the Bai family for everything?" The man with a short beard said, "The Bai family and the Lin family are old friends. Why do you have to distinguish so clearly? Besides, when you marry in the future, second uncle, if there's nothing else, Wanru will go back first." Before the man with a short beard finished his words, Lin Wanru stood up and said directly, "You." The short-bearded man pointed at him and said, "Forget it, let's not talk about this first. I heard that this time you used 8,000 taels of silver to buy a glazed ware. Such a large amount, why didn't you discuss it with us beforehand? Something went wrong, who would bear the responsibility?" "I will take the responsibility." Lin Wanru looked at him and said, "Glazed ware is extremely rare. I intend to make this glazed ware the treasure of the shop. If such a glazed ware is placed in the shop, it will definitely attract more customers. That's a good idea. We can give it a try. If it doesn't work, we can also resell it. The glazed bracelets sold by the Treasure Pavilion a few days ago are very expensive." After she finished her words, everyone thought carefully, and suddenly there were many voices of agreement in the hall. The man with a short beard opened his mouth and didn't know how to refute. He thought for a moment and asked, "I heard that when you came back this time you also brought back 2 people. Who are they?" Lin Wanru thought for a moment and said, "I saved them from those mountain bandits." The man with a short beard frowned and said, "The Lin family is not a charity hall. You can't take them back after you save them. Let them go these days. The Lin family doesn't keep idle people." "They aren't idle people." Lin Wanru looked at the short-bearded man and said, "That scholar is the accountant I just hired. A few days ago, Uncle Su said that his eyes were blurred from old age and he could no longer read the account books. He told me to hurry up and find a new accountant to replace him so that he can retire. That scholar is the new accountant. The accountant is such an important position, how can we let an unknown outsider do it?" The man with a short beard shook his head and said, "No, I don't agree. Father handed over the family business to me before he died. It doesn't matter if second uncle doesn't agree." Lin Wanru looked at everyone and said, "In 2 days I will let him take over the accounts from Uncle Su. Does any uncle have any objections?" The man with a short beard looked back and gave a look to the others. "I think what second brother said is reasonable. The accountant is so important, how can we let an unknown outsider do it? No, I also don't agree with this. Xiaoru, you should find another one." Immediately many people stood up and spoke. The woman called Lin Wanru looked at them and nodded. She said, "Since no one agrees, then this matter is decided." Chapter 665. Look at that, look at that. The short-bearded man pointed at Lin Wanru's back and said angrily, "This girl is getting more and more outrageous. Does she still have any respect for us elders? It's already like this now. In a few years when she gets married, the Lin family will no longer have the surname Lin. She has become more and more arbitrary in the past 2 years. If this goes on, the Lin family will become her own Lin family." After Lin Wanru left, the meeting room immediately became noisy under the leadership of the short-bearded man. All right. An old man sitting at the head of the table waved his hand, stood up and said, "That's enough. It's not the first time you've seen her like this. You've been given the money every year. Just take the money honestly and don't meddle in the business affairs." The old man glanced at the crowd and slowly walked out with his hands behind his back. The short-bearded man's face alternated between red and white. After a moment he waved his hand and said, "In any case, I don't agree to let an outsider manage the accounts of the Lin family. I'd like to see what kind of person she brought back." After that he snorted coldly, flicked his sleeves and left. In the small courtyard, the woman named Lin Wanru put 2 thick account books on the stone table and said, "It's not a problem to let you stay in the Lin family for a while, but there must be a reason. Otherwise there will be some trouble." I'll leave these 2 account books with you. If anyone asks, tell them that you're my new accountant. If you have any other plans in the future, you can leave at any time. Li Yi nodded and said, Thank you, Miss Lin. Don't thank me. Lin Wanru looked into the room and said, Although you are a scholar, but since you have come this far, you should put away that weak scholar act and act like a man. In the future, when you 2 live and start a family, it won't be as simple as studying. A woman can do this for you. I hope you won't let her down. After saying this, she turned around and left. Li Yi stood there in a daze, his expression somewhat blank. The man walked over and patted him on the shoulder, saying, Mrs. Ant ran away with a scholar despite her family's objections. Later, the scholar had a new lover, and then that young lady's ending wasn't very good. The man sighed and said, He passed away less than 2 years after returning to the Fu. Young Miss used to be closest to him, so she has always had prejudice against scholars. Li Yi's face was filled with astonishment. He never thought that Miss Lin would have such an experience. In that case, if he and Mississippi Lu hadn't been misunderstood by her, they wouldn't have received such care along the way. The man patted him on the shoulder again and said, So, you should treat this young lady a little better. What my young miss hates the most is people who abandon others after they have used them. Li Yi came back to his senses and nodded, saying, Don't worry, I will definitely treat her well. Li brothers, you don't look like that kind of person. I believe you, otherwise young miss wouldn't take care of you like this. The man smiled and waved his hand to leave. Li Yi shook his head. When he was about to walk back to his room, a voice suddenly came from behind him. Sup? He turned his head and saw a few figures step into the small courtyard. The leader was a middle-aged man with a short beard. The 2 people behind him were obviously lackeys and could be automatically ignored. The middle-aged man looked at him and asked, You are the accountant that Wanru hired? That's right, Li Yi replied. The man in front of him seemed to have a trace of hostility towards him. From the way he addressed Miss Lin and the information he got from the man, it should be the trouble that Lin Wanru mentioned earlier. The middle-aged man looked at him and said in a threatening tone, I don't care what she promised you. I just want to give you a piece of advice. Don't meddle in the affairs of the Lin family. Young man, you should know what it means to invite trouble. Li Yi gently waved his sleeves and didn't say anything. Being ignored, the middle-aged man showed a trace of anger on his face and said, Do you know who I am? I don't know who you are. Li Yi sighed and pointed at the hem of his robe. He said, I only know what it means to invite trouble. The middle-aged man looked down in the direction of his finger. Then his expression changed greatly. He didn't know when, but the hem of his robe was burning. Beside his feet was a pot that was used to boil medicine. At this time, the fire under the pot was so strong that it actually burned the hem of his robe. Second master, there's a pond outside. A person beside him saw him struggling to unbutton a row of buttons on his robe and said hurriedly. The second master was stunned for a moment when he heard this. Then he ran outside. No manners. Don't you know to close the door? After the 3 of them left in a hurry, Li Yi walked over to close the courtyard door. When he walked back again, he waved his sleeves casually and blew part of the fire to the side. Next, he just needed to use a small fire to boil it for a while. Mississippi Lu, who had changed her clothes, walked out and sat on the stone bench in the courtyard. She asked, When are we going back? She couldn't always wear the clothes of the inn's manservant. When Miss Lin came just now, she asked someone to bring food and some clothes for her. When your injury is better, Li Yi said as he poked the fire. Going back could not be rushed for the time being. Now he had to think of a way to get some money. Obviously, one word could decide a business of hundreds of thousands of taels of silver. Now the 2 of them didn't even have a copper coin. They couldn't rely on Miss Lin for everything. Mississippi Lu's body was weak now. If he bought some precious medicinal herbs to make some medicinal cuisine, her injury would probably recover faster. And all of this required silver. These things could wait until they moved out of the Lin family in a few days. After a while, Li Yi filtered the brewed medicine into a bowl and walked into the room. He looked at Mississippi Lu and said, It's time to take the medicine. Mississippi Lu looked up at him and stretched out her hand. There's only one left. Li Yi put the last milk candy in her hand. Then drink half. Mississippi Lu put the candy away and said. Li Yi shook his head and said firmly, No, drink all of it. Mississippi Lu frowned. Half. Li Yi suddenly thought of something and asked, You can't use your true chi now, right? As if she smelled something, Mississippi Lu looked up at him and asked, "What do you want? What do you think?" Li Yi looked down at her and said with a smile, "Be good and open your mouth. Don't you dare. Are you going to open your mouth or not?" "No. Don't force me to do it myself. Try moving." "Try. Let me go. Just you wait. When my injury is healed Outside the courtyard, Lin Wanru wanted to remind the scholar not to care about what others said. Hearing the faint voice coming from inside, she stood outside the door in a daze and couldn't help but blush. She looked inside in embarrassment and anger, then quickly turned around and left. After a while, Li Yi walked out of the room and saw the 2 account books on the stone table in the courtyard. He walked over slowly. Chapter 666. In June of the first year of Jinghe, from the moment he saw Mississippi Lu on the horse for the first time, he had lost countless confrontations with Mississippi Lu. It was the first time that Li Yi was in an absolute advantage. Finally he could hold his head high and sing like a surf. Even his mood inexplicably became better. He picked up the 2 account books and casually flipped through them. He usually asked others to check the accounts. He had never experienced the feeling of being an accountant. He shook his head and turned into the room. In the room, Mississippi Lu sat on the bed and looked at him coldly with eyes as sharp as swords. Anyway, she couldn't beat him now. Maybe when she recovered she wouldn't be able to beat him anymore. Thinking about it, he was a little expectant. Sitting at the table, he opened the 2 account books and read them carefully. Achoo! Somewhere in the Lin mansion, a short-bearded man wrapped in a quilt sat on the bed and sneezed fiercely. Yesterday his clothes caught fire and he jumped into the pond in the mansion in a hurry. Although he wasn't burned, he felt dizzy the next morning. The doctor said that he had caught a cold and had to stay at home to recuperate these days. This caused his dissatisfaction towards the new accountant in the manor to almost reach its peak. A young man stood in front of the bed and said with a frown, "Father, big sister is too much. She simply treats the Lin family as her own. This can't go on. I only asked her for 100 taels of silver today, but she didn't give it to me. She even asked me where I spent the 200 taels of silver last time." The short-bearded man waved his hand and said, "I know. Go and call your 3rd uncle and 4th uncle." "Okay, I'll go right away." The young man answered, stood up and walked out of the door. "Wait a minute." The short-bearded man stopped him and asked, "Where did you spend the 200 taels of silver last time?" The young man was stunned and said, "I donated it to Miss Xianxia in the top courtesan competition of Spring Fragrance House." "You are generous to throw 200 taels of silver to a prostitute like this." The middle-aged man waved his hand and said, "Go. When you come back, go to the ancestral hall and kneel for 4 hours." The young man who was about to step out stopped. Li Yi gave a long stretch and a crackling sound came from his body. After more than a month of bumping, he didn't eat or sleep well. He finally slept on the bed for a day, but now he had to sleep on the ground again. It was better to move out as soon as possible. This morning he was going to take a look at the Lin family's shop. He had made an appointment with the man named Lin Yong yesterday. On the way he was going to tidy up the yard there. If he was fast he could move in tonight. "Li brothers, have you woken up? We're about to go." Just as he finished washing up and walked into the courtyard, the big man was already shouting outside the door. "I'm coming." Li Yi stood in the courtyard and replied to him. He then returned to his room to inform Miss Lu before opening the door and walking out. The burly man called Lin Yong walked over and urged, "Hurry up, young miss should have already gone out by now." Li Yi waved his hand. "Let's go." The Lin family owned a few jewelry shops in Feng Prefecture. Although they were not considered as wealthy merchants, they were still quite well off. The shop they were going to was located in the most prosperous area in the center of the city. The name of the shop was pretty good. Fragrant Forest Park. The name of this jewelry shop was very unique. When a scholar was tired of studying and wanted to relax, he would walk on the street and look up, and coincidentally see such an attractive brothel. Therefore he happily entered the shop, but because he touched a female employee's hand he was surrounded by people. He couldn't escape the crime of taking liberties with a woman. Helpless, he could only spend 100 taels of silver in the shop to settle the matter. Otherwise he would be reported to the authorities. Unfortunately, there were only male employees in the shop. It was obvious that Miss Lin had not thought of such a good way to make money. "These are all valuable things. You guys move slowly. Put this down, I'll do it." The man in front directed the workers to unload the goods from the carriage. Among them there were many goods that were transported from the Jing kingdom. Although the Jing kingdom lagged behind the Qi kingdom in many aspects in terms of economy and military, it was far ahead in terms of fashion. It was the target of pursuit by all the neighboring countries, including the Qi kingdom. Ruidu, perfumes, soap and women's bras were popular in the Jing kingdom. They were also very popular in the Qi kingdom. Many merchants had shipped these goods from the Jing kingdom to the Qi kingdom and made a fortune. If the old emperor saw this scene, he would be very pleased. In some aspects, the Jing kingdom had subtly influenced many neighboring countries. Put this in the most conspicuous place. Be careful. This horse is worth 8,000 taels of silver. If it's damaged, you won't be able to pay for it even if you sell yourself. Li Yi saw the man take out an item from the box and put it in a place where he could see it as soon as he stepped into the shop. He couldn't help but be stunned. After a while, he slowly walked over and asked the woman, "Miss Lin, did you also buy this horse from the Jing kingdom?" Lin Wanru glanced at her and said lightly, "This is called Flying Swallow Horse." Of course, Li Yi knew this horse was called Flying Swallow Horse. The 4 words on the pedestal were made by him. This Miss Lin treated him and Mississippi Lu well. Li Yi really felt bad for letting her spend 8,000 taels of silver to buy such a thing. Her situation in the Lin mansion was not very good. If she really sold Liolia's glass, wouldn't she be blamed by those people? As a person who knew how to repay kindness, he would remind her to change hands as soon as possible if there was a chance in the future. Otherwise he would feel even worse. However, this Miss Lin didn't seem to be in a good mood now. There was still a long way to go. It wouldn't hurt to tell her in a few days. That girl is still injured. Hearing her sudden words, Li Yi turned his head in confusion. He didn't know why she suddenly said this. Lin Wanru glanced at him. Her expression was slightly abnormal. She said, "During this period you'd better control yourself." Control what? Li Yi asked doubtfully. This time Lin Wanru didn't answer. She directly turned her head and left. Inexplicable. Watching her leave in a hurry, Li Yi shook his head. He walked over and asked the man, "Brother Lin, where is the nearest pawn shop?" Pawn shop? A trace of doubt appeared on the man's face. He asked, "Why do you ask about the pawn shop? If you don't have money, just tell me. You can take some from me first." Li Yi shook his head and said, "I happen to have some useless things on me. I want to pawn them." The burly man nodded, pointed in a certain direction and said, "The pawn shop is quite far from here. Walk forward from here. Do you see that cloud? Walk to the bottom of that cloud, turn right into a street and then turn left. You still have to walk for about 2 more streets and then, the man scratched his head and said, "I only remember this much. When you get there you can find someone to ask." Li Yi was proud of his sense of direction to be able to find this pawn shop with such an unreliable way. He looked at the 2 big words, pawn shop, erected at the door of the shop and walked in. Chapter 667. Inside a pawn shop in Feng State City. The pawn shop's manager was a middle-aged man with a big belly. He wore a robe embroidered with copper coins. His eyes were so small that they were almost invisible when he squinted. He was holding a jade pendant in his hand and carefully examining it. After a while he put down the jade pendant and looked at the man wearing a bamboo hat in front of him, saying, "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't accept this jade pendant." Why? The man wearing a bamboo hat had an ethereal voice and his age was indiscernible. The shopkeeper changed the topic and asked, "May I ask, sir, where did you get this jade pendant from?" "I picked it up," the man replied lightly. As a pawn shop manager he had heard this kind of excuse many times in his life. He smiled and said, "Without the permission of the emperor, even a prince can't wear such a jade pendant. Either the person who made this jade pendant is extremely daring, or the person who stole it has eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's gall. Our shop is small, so we don't dare to accept this kind of thing. If that's the case, then I'll take my leave." The man wearing a bamboo hat put away the jade pendant and turned to leave without hesitation. He didn't expect that the other party would be so straightforward. The fat manager's expression changed and he immediately said, "Wait. 1,000 taels of silver." He looked at the man's back and said, 1,000 taels of silver. Leave this jade pendant here. I can't go any higher. Let me tell you the truth, no one in Feng State City would dare to accept this jade pendant except for me." The quality of this jade pendant was the best. It was shaped like a 5-clawed golden dragon that only emperors could have. Of course, this didn't mean that this kind of jade pendant only appeared in the royal family. Some officials who had great merits or were extremely favored would often be rewarded by the emperor. They would be able to own some royal items, but these things were treated as family heirlooms and rarely leaked out. Because of this, the value of these items was extremely high. Although they couldn't be sold openly, there was actually a market for them secretly. The manager walked to the door and closed it. He then slowly said, "How about it? Do you want to consider it?" After a quarter of an hour, a man wearing a bamboo hat came out of a pawnshop in Feng State City with a bag in his hand. 1,000 taels of silver sounded like a lot, but it wasn't heavy at all. In the future it would only be about 60 pounds. Buying medicinal herbs and other things required a lot of silver. The most valuable things they had were Mississippi Lou's autumn water and the jade pendant hanging on it. Mississippi Lou wouldn't sell the jade pendant even if she was beaten to death. He forgot when she had asked for that jade pendant from him. A dragon-shaped jade pendant was rarely seen. It was probably given by the old emperor. He didn't expect that it would come. As for the bamboo hat on his head, he had just bought it on the street. He had even borrowed a few taels of silver from the burly man surnamed Lin. Although no one here knew him, it was better to be vigilant just to be on the safe side. After all, he had a bamboo hat and a middle-aged man. Bai and Li and He Ling. On his way here, he passed by a medicine shop and wanted to buy some useful medicinal ingredients. Li took a few steps and suddenly stopped. He turned his head to look and saw 2 shadows flashing into the alley. Li didn't stop and continued forward. "Big brother, that man just came out of the pawnshop. His bag was bulging. He must have pawned something good. He's alone. Let's follow him. We might be able to kill a fat sheep this time. Contact third brother. We have a job." Whispers could be heard coming from a small alley somewhere. After an hour, Li came out of a pharmacy. He looked back and shook his head. How was this buying medicine? This was robbery. 1,000 taels of silver was gone in an instant. All he got was a small bag of medicinal herbs. It seemed that the difficulty of seeing a doctor and buying medicine had been like this since ancient times. He stood at the entrance of the pharmacy and looked in a certain direction. After walking for a short distance, he turned and walked into another alley. Chance. In the crowd, several people's faces lit up, and they quickly walked towards the small alley. Where's he? After a while, they looked at the dead end in front of them. They looked like they had seen a ghost. They clearly saw the man wearing the bamboo hat walk in here. How did he suddenly disappear? Could it be that he flew into the sky? Just as this thought appeared, a black shadow suddenly appeared in front of them. Li jumped down from the wall and knocked out 3 people. He stood at the entrance of the alley and asked the last person, "Who sent you? Where is the empress?" What empress?" The last man's face was pale and cold sweat dripped from his forehead. "It's good that you don't know her." Li walked over and knocked him out. He walked out of the alley. Halfway out, he turned back. He searched the waists of the 4 people and took out a few money bags. This was a critical time. It was time to pick up his old profession. His family is quite well off. He collected the dozens of taels of silver and walked out of the alley. At the same time, 2 streets away, another young man stepped into Fragrant Forest Park. "Greetings, young Master Bai." Inside the shop, several workers immediately bowed and greeted him. In a corner of the shop, the man surnamed Lin curled his lips and said, "That Bai guy, why is he here again?" The young man smiled and asked, "Is Wanru in the shop?" A worker immediately said, "Miss is in the back." The young man nodded. Just as he was about to go over, his expression suddenly froze. He looked in a certain direction in the shop. "This is horse stepping on swallow-colored glaze?" The young man's face revealed a surprised expression. When he was about to reach out to touch it, someone grabbed his wrist from the side. "Don't touch it. It's very valuable." The man named Lin Yong said expressionlessly. The young man showed an apologetic expression and said, "Sorry, it's the first time I've seen such a perfect colored glaze. I couldn't help myself." His eyes stayed on the colored glaze for a while. Seeing a figure walk out from the back, he hurriedly walked over and said with concern, "Wanru, I heard that you encountered bandits on your way back. How are you? Are you hurt?" A guilty expression appeared on the young man's face. "If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have let you go." It's all my fault. Lin Wanru took a step back and said, "Thank you for your concern, Brother Bai. I'm fine. As long as you're fine." The young man nodded, then a smile appeared on his face as he said, "Yesterday I happened to get a piece of Zhou Xian's calligraphy. I don't know much about poetry, but I know Wanru likes it, so I specially brought it over today as an apology." He waved his hand. Immediately, someone behind him took out a scroll of painting and unfolded it on the table beside him. Light perspiration slightly penetrates the jade, bathing fragrant orchids during the Ming Dynasty's Dragon Boat Festival. Fragrance blossoms fill the clear river. Colorful threads lightly wrap around red jade arms. Small talismans hang diagonally from green clouds. Beautiful people meet for 1,000 years. The handwriting on it was elegant and elegant, like moving clouds and flowing water. It was an excellent piece of semi-cursive writing. Zhou Xian was the #1 poet in the Qi Kingdom. Although he was young, he was very talented in poetry. Even those who did not know poetry would have heard of his reputation. The young man explained, "This poem is called Huan Shi Sha Huan Wu." It is said that when Zhou Xian was competing with the #1 scholar in the Jing Kingdom, the scholar wrote it. After Zhou Xian returned to the Jing Kingdom, he admired the scholar very much. He even imitated the scholar's handwriting many times. This is one of his imitations. Therefore, the style of his handwriting is different from his usual style. Lin Wanru looked at the words. A strange look appeared in her eyes, but she quickly hid it. She shook her head and said, "This is too valuable. I can't accept it." Zhou Xian was very famous in the Qi Kingdom. Not only was he famous for his poetry, but his calligraphy had also reached the peak. However, Zhou Xian treasured his calligraphy very much. Other than a few pieces, he rarely let them out. Because of this, his calligraphy had always been very valuable. It was said that each word was worth 1,000 taels of gold. The young man smiled and said, "Wanru, you don't have to decline. If this is left with me, it would be the real Emmingsu casting herself in the dark." The man named Lin Yong stood at the side. He touched his chin and said, "I don't think there's anything good about this. It can't be fake, right?" A servant behind the young man said angrily, "You fool, do you think you can understand Lord Zhao's words?" "I don't understand. Do you?" The big man glanced at him and casually pulled over a young man who had just walked into the shop. He asked, "Li brothers, they said this was written by Zhou Xian. You are a scholar. Come and take a look. Is this calligraphy good?" Li put down the bag and glanced at it. He said, "It's fake." Chapter 668. How could he not know whether this Huan Shi Shai Duan Wu painting before him was the work of Zhou Xian? Back then, that shameless fellow had begged him to give him the original manuscript of this famous poem. He had even brought up the international relations between the Qi Kingdom and the Jing Kingdom. Later, he had even personally sent a work that he was proud of to his home. It was impossible for him not to accept it. If he had known that this fellow's calligraphy and paintings were worth so much money in the Qi Kingdom, he would not have pawned the jade pendant that the old emperor had given him. Of course, shamelessness was one thing. When it came to poetry and composition, Li Yi had to admit that this fellow was indeed a genius. He could barely produce good calligraphy. There was no need for him to copy Wang Shiji's semi-cursive script into such a cowardly appearance. If anyone dared to say that this piece of calligraphy was written by Zhou Xian himself would probably want to beat that person up. The man curled his lips and said, Look. Even the Li brothers are saying that your calligraphy is fake. Hurry up and take it back." Before the young man could speak, the servant beside him immediately jumped out and said loudly, "Who are you? If you say it's fake, then it's fake. My young master spent 2,000 taels of silver to buy it. If you don't know anything, then don't speak carelessly. Brother, are you saying that this piece of calligraphy is fake?" The young man did not get angry. Instead, he revealed a smile and looked at him as he asked. Li Yi shook his head and said, "The calligraphy can't be said to be fake. However, if you insist that it was written by Zhou Xian, then it's a little fake." The young man asked again, "Brother, do you have proof?" Lin Wanru, who was at the side, tilted her head to look at him and shook her head slightly. Although Zhou Xian was famous in the Qi Kingdom, it did not affect the Jing Kingdom. He might not even know who Zhou Xian was, so how could he know Zhou Xian's calligraphy? Even she, who was extremely familiar with Zhou Xian's handwriting, could not tell that this piece of calligraphy was fake. How could this poor scholar who was picked up on the road be able to tell? If he spoke so casually, he would be put on the spot later. Evidence. Li Yi casually took a pen from the counter and scribbled on another piece of paper before saying, "Coincidentally, I am just like Zhou Xian. I admire the #1 scholar in the Jing Kingdom who is handsome, elegant, literary and peerless in martial arts. I like to copy his handwriting. Sire, surely you don't think that the famous Zhou Xian of the Qi Kingdom is inferior to a nobody like me?" Li Yi put down the pen and the piece of paper. When Lin Wanru and the young man looked over, they couldn't help but be stunned. There was only one sentence on that piece of paper. It was the last sentence of the Huan Shi Wu, "Beauty meets for 1,000 years. If there was no comparison, there would be no harm." Although Lin Wanru could not be considered a talented girl, she had received the education of a noble lady in the Lin family since she was young, so she still had the basic ability to distinguish between good and bad. This sentence, "Beauty meets for 1,000 years, was indeed much more pleasing to the eye. Just now, she had thought that the painting that Bai Yu had sent over was Zhao Xian's authentic work. Now it seemed that this scholar's writing was even more authentic than Zhao Xian's. Zhao Xian was a role model for the scholars of the Qi Kingdom. Naturally, he would not be defeated so easily by a scholar he had picked up from the streets. The only explanation was that this was not Zhao Xian's authentic work. The youth surnamed Bai's face alternated between green and red. After a while, he sighed and cupped his hands towards Li Yi, saying, "It was this Bai's poor eyesight that allowed me to be deceived by others. Thank you for the reminder, brother. I am Bai Yu. May I know your name?" Li Yi cupped his hands and said, "Brother Bai is too polite. Just call me Li Xian." "Wanru, I am truly sorry. It was all my negligence." The young man nodded at him. Then he looked at Lin Wanru and said apologetically, "I still have some matters to attend to. I will take my leave first." The young man came quickly and left just as quickly. Of course, before he left, he took the authentic work of Zhao Xian with him. It was no wonder that this Miss Lin was not interested in him at all. He did not care at all when it came to picking up girls. He either did not give her a gift or gave her a fake one. Most importantly, he was exposed in front of her. For someone like this to be able to pick up girls, he must be very rich. The man asked with a gossipy expression, "Li brothers, you said earlier that the #1 scholar of the Jing Kingdom was handsome, elegant, literary and unparalleled in martial arts. Is that true or false? Isn't he a scholar? How could he be unparalleled in martial arts?" Li Yi looked at him and said, "Do you know that he is well versed in both literature and martial arts? In the Jing Kingdom, the name, Deadly Scholar, can stop children from crying at night. Which martial artist in the martial arts world would not tremble upon hearing it?" Lin Wanru thought for a while and suddenly said, "I have heard that Li Yi is no more than 4 feet and 5 inches tall. He is short and has the head of a rat and the eyes of a deer." "What?" Li Yi could not help but widen his eyes when he heard this. 1 foot and 33 centimeters, 4 feet and 5 inches. In total, he was not even 1.5 meters tall. Was he that short? And the remaining 1 foot was eaten by the people of the Qi Kingdom? Short and 5 inches tall? Rat in the eyes of a deer. Just go to the capital and ask around. Who would not give a thumbs up when the name of County Uncle Li was mentioned? Who did not know that County Uncle Li was handsome and elegant? He was the object of love for countless girls in the capital, regardless of gender and age. Slander, this was a shameful slander. He said with some embarrassment and anger, "Who said this?" "That is what people say." Lin Wanru put away the piece of paper and said, "However, you are from the Jing Kingdom, so you should have seen the #1 scholar." "It seems that the rumors are wrong." Li Yi agreed with her words and said, "Wrong? It is not just wrong, it is a big mistake." The man nodded and said, "I think so too. No matter what, he is the #1 scholar. He must be much better than Bai Yu, that pretty boy." "You are right. County Uncle Li is naturally not comparable to those pretty boys." Li Yi nodded and said. The man looked at him with a strange look and said, "Aren't you scholars all pretty boys?" "Young master, that guy dared to deceive us with a fake. Report him to the authorities immediately." On the street, a servant behind the young man said angrily while gritting his teeth, "You don't have to worry about this." The young man stopped in his tracks and turned around to say, "Find out the background of that Li Xian and his relationship with Wanru." "Yes, young master." The servant was stunned for a moment and immediately replied. At the same time, in an alley somewhere in the city, A figure slowly climbed up with the help of the wall. He rubbed his slightly aching head and shook the 3 people lying around him to wake them up. What happened just now? I think I was knocked out. Where's that fat sheep? Fat sheep my ass. The leader of the group knocked his head. He thought it was a fat sheep, but he did not expect to be blocked by a tiger. Not only did he get beaten up, but he also lost his wallet. Next time, keep your eyes open. If you see someone wearing a bamboo hat, take a detour. The leader rubbed his head and said bitterly, "Let's go." Not long after, several people walked out of the alley. As they walked on the street, they began to look for their next target. The big man saw a scholar coming out of a brothel. Before he could walk over, he was suddenly pulled by the arm and pulled to a corner. "What are you doing?" His expression changed. He thought that he was about to be discovered. When he turned around and saw a thin man, his expression relaxed and he said in an unfriendly tone. The thin man looked at him and said mysteriously, "May I ask if you have heard of the Empress?" The Empress? The man was stunned for a moment. He pondered these words and finally thought of something. His eyes became fierce. "You are together?" "What? Together?" The thin man's face was just filled with doubt when his abdomen was kicked and he was sent flying. "It's the Empress again. You guys are in cahoots, right? The Empress of Heaven, right? I'll let you be the Empress." The big man rushed over in 2 steps and punched and kicked the thin man. After a long time he stopped with satisfaction and spat on the ground. "Frem, if you dare mention the Empress in front of me again, I'll beat you up every time I see you." Chapter 669. Li Brothers, the courtyard has been tidied up. You and that lady will live here from now on. Lin Yong walked out of a small courtyard next to Fonglin Park and said, "This place is close to the shop, so we can take care of each other." The courtyard had been tidied up by a few shop assistants. It was said that it was where Miss Lin stayed for a short period of time. It was not big, but the location was very good. It was almost in the prime area of the city. Li Yi went in with the man's lead. Next to the main room there was a small kitchen. It looked like it had never been used. It could be used with some pots and pans, which was exactly what he wanted. Apart from the small kitchen there was only one room. This place is not big. Miss used to rest occasionally at noon. You two can make do with it. The big man looked around and said, "See if you still lack anything and tell me. Tomorrow Miss will have someone send it over from the mansion." Li Yi shook his head and said, "Thank Miss Lin for me, but there is no need. We can slowly add the rest in the future." After the man left, Li Yi first bought 2 bolts of cloth from the cloth shop outside and hung them in the room, dividing the bedroom from the middle. There were no extra rooms here, so he could only make do like this. The kitchen utensils were also bought, and he even had time to buy rice and vegetables. Before the sun set, he had almost bought everything he needed. If there was anything missing, he could wait until tomorrow. After that, he locked the door. Fonglin Park happened to be closed, so he returned to the Lin family with the man. He refused the man's offer to send them in a carriage and helped Mississippi Lu out of the courtyard. He had been away from home for more than a month. He didn't know how Rui and the others were doing. The news from Suzhou would probably take a few days to get back. They probably didn't expect that he had come to the Qi Kingdom. He had to find a way to get the news out as soon as possible. He didn't have to worry about the situation in the capital. Even if the academy had its own operating system with Li Xian watching over it and Li Han around, there wouldn't be any problems. It was unlikely that anything big would happen to his family, and it was unlikely that the old emperor's health would deteriorate to that extent in just 3 to 5 months. Yongning and Shaning would probably stay in the palace for a long time. He didn't know if the eldest princess would still practice her sword in the morning dew hall every day. What was the situation in the small courtyard in Willow Lane? Li didn't know any of this. When he walked out of the Lin mansion, he turned his head and saw that Miss Lu was frowning. Li thought for a while, squatted down and said, "Come on up." Mississippi Lu shook her head and said, "It's okay. I can walk." Li urged, "You don't have a problem, but I do. It's getting dark. If we continue walking like this, we won't make it before the curfew. Hurry up, don't dawdle." Mississippi Lu glanced at him, gritted her teeth and said, "When my injuries are healed." Li lifted his head and looked at her. "What do you want to do after you've recovered?" "Hurry up, don't dawdle. I'll thank you properly when I recover." Mississippi Lu laid on Li Yi's back and slowly closed her eyes. She emphasized on the word, "thank you." Li Yi waved his hand and said, "You're welcome. We're family. It's what I should do." It took about half an hour to walk from the Lin family to the shop. The night was about to fall. There were not many pedestrians on the streets of Feng State City. Under the light of the setting sun, a long shadow spread out behind him. Li Yi suddenly sighed and said, "Don't be so silly in the future." This time Mississippi Lu did not respond. Thinking of something, Li Yi tilted his head and asked, "Actually, there's something that I've always been curious about." "What is it?" Mississippi Lu asked lightly. "How did you fall in love with me?" Li Yi looked at her profile and asked, "The first time we met you were riding on a horse." Mississippi Lu thought for a moment and said, "Uncle Fong said that the scholar looked easy to bully, so I chose him." Li Yi curled his lips and said, "Admit it. You were subdued by my temperament. At that time your hair was messy, your clothes were untidy, your head was full of sweat, and you even lost one of your shoes. Is this your temperament?" Mississippi Lu suddenly asked curiously, "By the way, why did you run that day?" There was no way to continue this conversation. Li Yi turned his head and quickened his pace. He said, "I like to run." "It's none of your business." Feng Province was an important city of the Qi Kingdom. It was the political and military center of the surrounding prefectures. The curfew system was very strict. The city gates were closed at the hour of the sea. Even the red light streets and alleys were not allowed to walk on the streets at this time. Those who violated the rules would be punished, and those who violated the rules would be sentenced to death. After the second watch, there was no one except for the night watchmen and patrolling soldiers. At this time it was close to the hour of the sea. There were not many people on the streets. A group of riders quickly entered the city and galloped through the streets. Soon they arrived in front of a luxurious mansion. The figure at the very front dismounted his horse and asked, "Has His Highness rested?" A servant at the entrance of the mansion immediately said, "It's not the hour of the sea yet. His Highness is dealing with official business. Please wait for a moment, General. I'll go inform him immediately." Not long after, in a study in the mansion, Shinhan greets His Highness. The man knelt on the ground and greeted the young man behind the table respectfully. "General Shin, you don't have to be so courteous." The young man quickly walked out from behind the table and helped him up. "General Shin, please sit." He pointed to a chair at the side and then asked in confusion, "General, you're not in Chong Province. Why did you come here in the middle of the night? Is there something important?" Chong Province was at the border of the Qi Kingdom. It was separated from the Jing Kingdom's Shu Province by a river. Shin Han was one of the generals guarding the city and would not leave the city easily. "Your Highness, I do have something important to report." Shin Han cupped his hands and said, "Over a month ago, Li Yi was taken away from the capital of the Jing Kingdom. A few days ago he appeared in Shu Province and then disappeared without a trace. The officials of Shu Province almost turned the entire Shu Province upside down, but they could not find him. I'm guessing that he has come to our Qi Kingdom." The young man looked stunned and asked in disbelief, "Who did you say? Li Yi has come to the Qi Kingdom?" "Yes." Shin Han's expression was solemn as he said, "This news has almost spread throughout the Jing Kingdom and reached Shu Province a few days ago. I only learned about it a day ago, so I rushed over to inform your Highness." Shin Han had been to the capital with His Highness before, so he naturally knew how important Li Yi was to His Highness. He said, "He has a grudge against the King of Shu. If he falls into the king's hands, he will not have a good ending. Moreover, he has not appeared in Shu Province since then. I'm guessing that he has come to the Qi Kingdom." "That's great." The young man's face lit up with joy. He said, "Pass down the order immediately. Ask the surrounding counties to pay more attention. Once they find any traces of him, they must invite him to Feng Province. In addition, send people to closely monitor the movements in Shu Province. If he is discovered by the King of Shu in Shu Province, immediately send envoys to negotiate." "I understand." The man named Shin Han bowed and said. The young man walked to the window and looked out. A smile appeared on his face as he murmured, "Brotherly, oh brotherly, we haven't seen each other for a long time." By the river in Shu Province, an old man with unkempt hair stared at the surging river. A trace of doubt appeared on his face. Could it be that he has really gone to the Qi Kingdom? Chapter 670. From today onwards, Li Yi planned to raise Mississippi Lu like a pig for a long time. The contents of this bowl of medicinal cuisine were very rich. Ordinary people might not be able to withstand the effects of the medicine, but with Mississippi Lou's physique, there was no need to worry about the problem of not being able to withstand it. With all kinds of tonics, the sooner her body recovered, the sooner she could go back. He served a bowl of porridge to Mississippi Lou and himself and sat in the yard. The man named Lin Yong walked in from outside. He was stunned for a moment and said, "Li brothers, have you eaten?" Li nodded and looked at him. "Brother Lin, do you want a bowl?" The big man waved his hand with a smile and said, "No need, no need. I've already eaten on the way here." Li looked at him and asked, "Really?" "Delicious, it's really delicious." Lin Yong put down the bowl, wiped his mouth and praised, "I didn't expect Li brothers to know how to cook, and your cooking skills are so good. If your sister-in-law had half of your cooking skills, I would wake up laughing in my dreams." Seeing him licking his lips, Li asked, "Do you want another bowl?" "Enough, enough." Lin Yong smiled and waved his hand. "I can't eat any more." When he ate the second bowl, Lin Yong's hands finally slowed down. While eating, he said, "I've seen those scholars often say that the kitchen is far from the kitchen. Li brothers, you are different from them. Miss Lu followed you because of her good fortune in her previous life. She didn't choose the wrong person." We looked back. Fortunately, Mississippi Lou's body hadn't recovered yet. Otherwise, this brother Lin would definitely come in vertically and leave horizontally. Recently, he often saw Lin Yong these days. The things in the jewelry store were very valuable. Losing any one of them would be a big loss. Not to mention, if they were to encounter a group of bold people who would openly rob them, the loss of a single store would mean that everyone in the Lin family would have to starve for a whole year. Therefore, the Lin family arranged a lot of guards in every store. The Feng Lin court next to it was under Lin Yong's responsibility. Those fellows at home don't have any other skills, but they know how to stab their own people in the back. These few days they said that young Miss spent 8,000 taels of silver to buy a decoration, and they said that they hired an outsider to be their accountant. Lin Yong said, "If Li brothers hear any rumors, don't mind them. They are just idle all day." Li couldn't be bothered with the matters of the Lin family. Naturally, he wouldn't care about it. That Miss Lin obviously had some tricks up her sleeve. It shouldn't be a problem for her to deal with those people. In the past few days, he accompanied Mississippi Lou to chat, sleep, and when he was really bored, he did some accounting. He was idle, but he spent his money quickly. In a few days, he spent another 200 taels of silver. Buying medicine really burned money. He had free time, but he didn't stop practicing. His inner strength had almost caught up, but his experience and moves were still very lacking. Mississippi Lou was injured, but it didn't stop her from sitting at the side and giving pointers. When he turned around, he saw Lin Wanru standing at the door in a daze. A trace of surprise appeared on Li Yi's face. He said, "Miss Lin, what's the matter?" Lin Wanru came back to her senses and shook her head. She said, "It's nothing. I'll leave first." It was just that every time she was upset, she would come here out of habit. This time she forgot that she had arranged for the eloping couple to stay here. "Miss Lin, wait a moment." Li Yi called out to her. He walked back into the house and took something out. He handed her the account book that Lin Wanru gave him a few days ago. He said, "These 2 accounts have been checked. The details are in here. Miss Lin, take it back." Lin Wanru nodded, took the account book and turned to leave. She had just sent the account book a few days ago. An accountant would need at least half a month to check all the accounts of the Lin family for an entire year. Moreover, Lin Wanru knew very well that he had been around Miss Lu for the past few days. He had been taking care of her in every possible way. How could he have had the time to check the accounts? Fortunately, he had already checked the accounts. He had only sent them for others to see so that they wouldn't gossip behind his back. Now that he had achieved his goal, he naturally had to take back the accounts. "That's right, who is Lin Shuwen?" Li Yi suddenly asked when Lin Wanru was about to leave. Lin Wanru turned her head and said, "My second uncle." "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Li Yi waved his hand and said, "Goodbye, Miss Lin." "Raise your hand a little higher. Did you not eat?" "Too slow. If you met a true expert, your head would have fallen off before you could stab with your sword. This time it was too fast. I didn't see it clearly. Let's do it again." As Lin Wanru walked out of the courtyard, she heard Miss Lu's voice coming from behind her. She looked behind her, shook her head and left. The way this young man and woman interacted with each other was hard to understand. The woman was extremely beautiful, but her temperament was a little cold. She seemed to be fond of playing with knives and swords. Elder Lin had also said that she was a martial artist. As for that scholar, she had never seen him read a book. Every day he was busy in front of the stove. According to Brother Lin, the food he cooked was very delicious. Even the chefs of the restaurants couldn't compare. He didn't look like a scholar at all. Although he wasn't a scholar, his handwriting was so good that it was as good as the heavens. In private, she had also compared the words "a beauty meets for 1,000 years" to the calligraphy and paintings in her family collection. She felt that those words were not inferior to some famous calligraphers in the Qi Kingdom, however, although it was strange, that scholar treated Miss Lu extremely well. If her aunt had met such a person in the past, she probably wouldn't have died with a grudge. Some thoughts emerged from the depths of her heart. Lin Wanru shook her head and suppressed those thoughts. What she needed to worry about at the moment was another matter. The people in the family led by second uncle had brought up some matters. In front of everyone, some of their words were very unpleasant to the ears. It was obvious that they were fighting for power. The second and third branches didn't have many resources in their hands. It was understandable that they wanted to force her to give up some of her power. Although she wasn't afraid of them, she naturally didn't want to see the peace in the family broken. "Did you hear? Young Miss hired an accountant from outside. I don't know anything about him." "I heard. He was placed next to the shop. I saw him the last time. I also heard that young Miss has an affair with that scholar." "It can't be. Then what should young Master Bai do?" When Lin Wanru walked in from outside, she saw the servants in the residence gathered together and whispered. When they saw her walking over, they quickly dispersed. Her expression didn't change as she walked straight back to her room. She placed the account book on the table and opened a book of poems. Not long after, a maid came in from outside and said, "Young Miss, second master wants you to go to the meeting hall." "Got it." Lin Wanru nodded and stood up. Her wrist accidentally brushed against the side of the table and an account book was accidentally swept off. She bent down to pick up the account book. When she saw a few pieces of paper fall out, she was slightly startled. Lin Xuan. At first glance, she saw a name written densely on that piece of paper. She also picked up the other pieces of paper. After looking at them carefully for a while, she put the account book to the side. It was only now that she finally understood what that scholar meant when he asked that question. Chapter 671. In the meeting room of the Lin family. Look at the accounts. The total income of the 3 shops last year was 10% less than that of the year before. The investment was obviously more, so there should be more surplus. This doesn't make sense. Lin Xuan was the second eldest in the Lin family and usually had a great say in the family. The eldest son of the Lin family died early, leaving only a daughter and a young son. It was reasonable to say that Lin Xuan, as the second eldest, could take over all the business of the Lin family. However, no one expected that the head of the family would hand over all the business of the Lin family to Lin Wanru, who was a woman before he died. Lin Wanru was the eldest daughter of the Lin family. Before she got married, she was also a member of the Lin family. Moreover, she had shown a talent for business since she was a child and had participated in the family business for a long time. For this arrangement, everyone was embarrassed to say anything. Of course, not many people cared about how many means a girl could have. These things could be slowly taken back from her. When she got married, she wouldn't be able to take anything with her. However, later they realized that they still looked down on this niece. In the past 2 years, the business of the Lin family was getting bigger and bigger in her hands, and others couldn't get involved. In the past 2 years, she could be said to have monopolized the economic power of the Lin family. At this time, a young man said, "Second uncle, are you suspecting the eldest sister?" "I didn't say that." Lin Xuan picked up a booklet, patted it on the table and said, "Anyway, the account book is here. The loss is the loss. I think Wanru has to give all of us an explanation for this matter." A middle-aged man thought for a moment, stood up and said, "Last year the jewelry business was generally low, and it was inevitable that the profit was reduced. We can't blame all the problems on Wanru." Second brother is not blaming Wanru. She is in charge of the family business. We don't know what to do, so it is reasonable to ask. Yes, this is our family business. We can't always be blind. This is also for the sake of the Lin family. In the meeting hall, everyone was clearly divided into 3 camps. One of them was led by Lin Xuan, who was holding on to the matter of profits. It was obvious that he had something else to say. The other side was speaking up for Lin Wanru, but there weren't many of them. Those who were neutral were still the majority. No matter what, it was not their turn to be in charge of the Lin family. No matter who the business was handed over to, they would get money every year. As long as there was a lot of money, there was no need for them to take sides. Stop talking. Wanru is here. Let's see what she has to say. Someone suddenly stood up and said. Everyone turned to look at the door. Lin Wanru walked in from outside. She nodded slightly at everyone, then looked at Lin Xuan and asked, Second uncle, did you ask me to come here for something important? There is really one thing that is more important. Lin Xuan nodded and said, Yesterday I looked through the account and found that the investment of our Lin family last year was 20% more than the year before. Why did the profit decrease? This is really unreasonable. The business of the Lin family has always been managed by Wanru. I'm afraid that Wanru has to give all of us an explanation for this matter, right? Lin Wanru looked at him and asked, In business there are profits and losses. It is normal to have a small fluctuation in profit, isn't it? Lin Xuan smiled and said, What Wanru said is true. There are profits and losses in business, but last year was obviously a good year. It is impossible for the profit not to increase but decrease. Of course, I don't mean anything else. It's just that the Lin family belongs to all of us. The Lin family needs all of us to protect it. It concerns the interests of all of us, so we can't be careless. Lin Xuan had a smile on his face as if he was thinking for everyone's sake. So, what do you mean, second uncle? Lin Wanru looked at him and asked. Lin Xuan said with a smile, There are so many people in the Lin family. We also feel sorry to let you, a girl, take care of it inside and outside. Such a heavy burden falls on you, and it is inevitable that there will be such negligence. So, I think it is better to divide the other two shops and hand them over to others to manage. In this way you will be much more relaxed and can concentrate more. The unspoken implication of his words was that Lin Wanru, as a woman, was unable to manage such a large Lin family. That was why there was a loss this time. It was better for her to give up her power early on. That way everyone's interests could be guaranteed. I think second uncle is right. Yes, Wanru should also have a good rest. I agree. As soon as Lin Xuan finished his words, many people immediately responded. Many people in the Lin family had already complained about handing over the family business to a girl. Naturally, they would take the opportunity to push it. Even some people who had always been neutral were a little shaken. Lin Wanru sighed and said, We are all family, second uncle. Why do you have to be so persistent? Lin Xuan's expression changed when he heard that. He said, Wanru, what do you mean? Second uncle is also thinking for the Lin family and for you. Do you think second uncle is harming you? So, second uncle is really not going to let us go this time? Lin Wanru looked at him again and said, You really take my good intentions for ill intentions. Lin Xuan said with a face full of anger, I am doing this for the Lin family. Why can't you understand? In that case, Lin Wanru looked at him and said, From today onwards, second uncle doesn't need to worry about the supply of goods from the shop in the north of the city. I will arrange for someone else to take over. After saying that, she turned to look at the other two people and said, Third uncle, fourth uncle, you don't need to go to the shop today. I will arrange for a new shopkeeper as soon as possible. As soon as Lin Wanru's voice fell, the hall suddenly became quiet. Many people raised their heads and looked at her in disbelief. How could she still say such words at this time? Lin Xuan was stunned. Instead of being angry, he laughed and said, Wanru, do you really think that the Lin family is your Lin family? I'm afraid no one will agree to such an overbearing attitude. He looked back at the people in the hall and said, You have all seen how overbearing she has been in the past 2 years. Since when did a woman have the right to be in charge of the Lin family? Second uncle, don't be so agitated. Lin Wanru shook her head and looked at him. She said, When I came over just now, I sent someone to report to the authorities. Second uncle colluded with the Bai family, who supplied the goods and took 17,652 taels of silver from the shop in a year. This is already more than 10% of the Lin family's annual profit. For embezzling so much silver, I'm afraid you will have to go to prison for decades. But second uncle, you don't need to worry. I will take care of everything after this for you. Aunt has entered the Lin family, so she is a member of the Lin family. You can go in peace. The family will take good care of her. If Aunt wants to remarry, we will find a good husband for her. Xiao Fei has already grown up and can take care of himself. The family will not mistreat him. You don't need to worry about this. Lin Wanru said these words calmly, but it set off a storm in the hearts of the people. Lin Xuan was stunned for a moment and his expression changed greatly. He opened his mouth and was about to speak, but Lin Wanru waved her hand and said, "Second uncle, you don't need to thank me. We are all family. This is what I should do." After saying this, she added, "The people from the Yamen should be here soon. Second uncle, don't you want to go back and prepare?" Chapter 672. You don't have any evidence. Don't slander me. Lin Xuan's face turned from green to white and then to green again. A trace of disbelief quickly appeared on his face, but it soon disappeared. He pointed at Lin Wanru and said, "You want to firmly control the Lin family and can't bear to let go of power, so you use this despicable method to frame your second uncle. You don't care about the Lin family. Do you still care about me, your second uncle?" "It's because I care about the Lin family and second uncle, so I wanted to suppress this matter," Lin Wanru sighed and said. But after second uncle's reminder, Wanru suddenly realized that the Lin family is not my Lin family, nor is it second uncle's Lin family. It is everyone's Lin family. Everyone trusts me so much, but Wanru actually wants to play favorites. I'm really ashamed. As for the evidence, Lin Wanru took out a few pieces of paper from her sleeve and put them on the table beside her. She said, "These are the evidence of second uncle's corruption in the past year. They are written clearly one by one. Everyone take a look." Lin Xuan grabbed the pieces of paper and glanced at them. His face immediately turned pale and bloodless. He knelt on the ground and cried, "Wanru, Wanru, please let me go. Second uncle was wrong. Second uncle was bewitched. I beg you, don't report me to the authorities. I don't want to go to jail, I don't want to go to jail." The second master of the Lin family, who had been righteously indignant and said that he was thinking for the sake of the Lin family, was now in tears and snot. He no longer mentioned the matter of breaking up the shop. He knelt on the ground and cried bitterly, almost kowtowing. The others looked at each other when they saw this. Someone took the pieces of paper and glanced at them. His face immediately changed. "Second brother, why did you, 18,000 taels of silver. You've taken all the money that was missing. You said Wanru, so it was you." Looking at Lin Xuan's performance, they didn't doubt the authenticity of these pieces of paper at all. The hall immediately burst into an uproar. Lin Wanru shifted her position slightly and stood beside Lin Xuan, not letting him face her directly. She looked at the crowd and said, "After all, this is our Lin family's matter. What do you all think we should do about it?" The noise in the hall decreased slightly. Everyone looked at each other and didn't say anything. This matter was really difficult to deal with. After all, Lin Xuan was a member of the Lin family. If they really took him to court, it would be a disgrace to the Lin family, and it would be detrimental to the stability of the Lin family. However, if they just let it go and pretend that they didn't see it, they wouldn't be able to convince the masses. After a moment, an old man sighed and said, "Although Xuan is wrong, he is still a member of our Lin family. We don't need to trouble the authorities with this matter, right?" Another man nodded and said, "Third uncle's words are reasonable. We shouldn't wash our dirty linen in public. If it gets out, our Lin family will become the laughingstock of Feng State City. We don't need to trouble the authorities. Wanru, what do you think we should do about this matter?" Someone shook his head and looked at Lin Wanru. Lin Xuan suddenly raised his head and a glimmer of hope emerged in his eyes. Lin Wanru was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Second uncle, you don't need to worry about the supply of goods in the store. I will slowly deduct the money from the second branch's money. Thank you, Wanru. Thank you, Wanru." Lin Xuan stood up from the ground, wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and said repeatedly. Lin Wanru turned her head and looked at the other two men. "Third uncle, fourth uncle, you don't need to busy yourself with the matters of the store for the next 2 days. I will arrange for a new shopkeeper to go there in a few days." The two men were stunned. They weren't the ones who were embezzling. What did it have to do with them? "I'm afraid this isn't appropriate." One of the men opened his mouth with a troubled expression. Before he could finish his words, he was interrupted by someone behind him. "Let's do it this way. Wanru, you can arrange these things. We will listen to you when it comes to the business." Yes, yes, yes. Third brother, fourth brother, just do what I ask you to do. Why are you asking so many questions? Someone else said. Okay. Seeing that people kept speaking up, the two men's faces gradually showed despair. In the end, they could only grit their teeth and agree. The store is busy. If there's nothing else, I will leave first. Lin Wanru looked at the crowd and said. No. Wanru, you go ahead. The matter of the store is more important. It's fine here. Remember to inform the authorities and say that it's a misunderstanding. When the crowd heard this, they all spoke up. If it wasn't necessary, they wouldn't want to stay with her. Even if she stood there without saying a word, she would give them an invisible layer of pressure. Today was clearly a drama of the second branch forcing the Lin family to abdicate. In the end, the second, third, and fourth branches suffered a double loss. They had completely lost their business with the Lin family. Delegating power had turned into taking it back. In the future, her words in the Lin family would only have more weight. Watching her leave, then looking at Lin Xuan, who was covered in cold sweat, many people secretly shook their heads. They had underestimated the eldest daughter of the Lin family. Lin Yong leaned against the door and grinned. When he saw Lin Wanru coming out, he hurriedly followed her. Miss, where are we going now? Lin Wanru walked past a moon door and said, to the store. Lin Yong scratched his head and asked doubtfully, to the store? Isn't that going to the yamen? Why are we going to the yamen? Lin Wanru said as she walked. There's a new batch of goods that was delayed for 2 days. Remember to hurry them up. Won't the authorities send people to arrest second master? Lin Yong was stunned, but he didn't care too much. Of course he wanted to go to the store and not the yamen. Seeing that it was almost mealtime, it wasn't a bad idea to go to the Li brothers' place for a bowl of porridge. To be honest, he had never tasted such delicious porridge in his life. Although it wasn't full, he felt full of energy after drinking it. He could finally raise his head in front of his mother-in-law at night. It was just that he was prone to nosebleeds after eating, so he always had a cloth to block it. In the small courtyard next to Fonglin Park, the mealtime today was 15 minutes earlier than usual. If it was mealtime and Brother Lin got 2 bowls of porridge, there wouldn't be enough food for 2 people. These were all things that burned money. Times were different now. Even a penny had to be split in half. With those medicinal herbs, Mississippi Lou's body recovered very well. Now she could walk on her own without help. Of course, she still couldn't use her true qi. Most of the time she could only listen obediently. Li Yi could do whatever he wanted for the time being and didn't have to worry about her revenge. However, he had to think of another way to earn more money. This time he couldn't find a jade pendant that was worth 1,000 taels of silver. Just as he was worrying, there was a knock on the door. Lin Yong didn't have the habit of knocking on the door. Li Yi looked up at Lin Wanru and asked, "Has the matter of the account been settled?" After all, he had received so much kindness from the girl. If he could do something for her, it would be a way to repay the favor. "It's settled." Lin Wanru nodded and said, "Thank you this time. If it weren't for those pieces of paper, the matter this time would actually be a little troublesome." She had never doubted that there would be so many problems with the accounts that had been checked. This time the scholar that she picked up really gave her a big surprise. Li Yi waved his hand and said, "You're welcome. This is the duty of an accountant." A rare smile appeared on Lin Wanru's face. She said, "It's just a temporary measure. You don't have to take it seriously. To be honest, this time, you have indeed helped me solve a big problem." Nearly 20,000 taels of silver had permanently swept away the unstable elements within the family. A few days ago, Lin Wanru had never thought that this scholar she had picked up from the streets would be of such great help to her. Lin Wanru looked at him and said, "I don't like to owe favors. If you have any difficulties, feel free to tell me. If it's something that I can do, I will do my best to help you." Li Yi looked at her and asked, "Do you really have to thank me?" Lin Wanru nodded. "To be honest, I don't like to owe favors either." Li Yi thought for a moment and said, "Actually, in the past when someone asked me to check the accounts, something terrible would happen. The price was not small, but this time let's forget about it. You've helped me and I've helped you. We don't owe each other anything. How about it?" Lin Wanru nodded and turned to walk outside. When she reached the door, she stopped and turned back to ask, "I don't know. What do you mean by something terrible?" After saying this, she felt that this sentence was a little redundant. Without waiting for Li Yi to answer, she shook her head and turned to leave. In the courtyard, Li Yi sighed and said slowly, "The court is unstable. Officials are stripped of their titles, their properties are confiscated, and they are exiled. People are beheaded." Chapter 673. Confiscation, banishment, beheading, Lin Wanru murmured as she walked back to the shop. Then she shook her head and walked into the shop. When the man called Lin Yong saw her, he immediately walked over and said with a smile, "Miss, we really made the right decision to buy this horse this time. Many people have come to see it these past few days. There's a lot more business every day than before." Colored glaze was a treasure among treasures. It was rare to see it even in a jewelry store, let alone such a large horse stepping on a swallow. These days the flow of customers in Fonglin Garden had greatly increased. Although many people came to see the colored glaze and gain knowledge, it was indeed a great boost to the business of the shop. Lin Yong looked at the colored glaze with his eyes shining. He said, "Many people came to inquire about the price of this treasure, but I refused them all. This is the most precious treasure of our Fonglin Garden. I won't sell it no matter how much money you offer." In a small courtyard next to Fragrant Forest Park, Li Yi was fanning the fire with a small fan in his hand. He had wanted to remind Miss Lin to sell off the flying swallow grass while it was still possible. If some ill-intentioned person came to the kingdom of Qi and tried to sell it off as soon as possible, this thing would be ruined. However, after being disturbed by her just now, he completely forgot about this matter. He could only think about it next time. Mississippi Lu had been recuperating at home these days. She didn't go out at all. She stayed for a long time, she might get sick. Therefore he planned to go out with her at night. On the one hand it was to relax. On the other hand he could experience the nightlife of the people in the Qi kingdom. If it weren't for Mississippi Lu, he could also study the similarities and differences of the brothel culture between the Qi kingdom and the Jing kingdom. As an important political and military city, the curfew system in Fengzhou City was very strict. For many cities in the back of the city, nightlife just started after 9 p.m. But in this city, people were not allowed to appear on the streets after 9 p.m. The consequences of violating this prohibition were very serious. However, the more severe and oppressive the system was, the more brilliant and prosperous things would be born. The night market in the city, which was even busier than during the day, was a product of this. In less than 2 hours the whole city was in a carnival. A narrow river flowed through the city. The surface of the river was sparkling. Pleasure boats passed through it. Pedestrians weaved along the riverbank. The hawkers along the street shouted their wares incessantly. The tea-houses and taverns along the street were thriving. Sitting on a tall building by the water, he took a sip of wine and looked down at the women dancing gracefully with their sleeves fluttering in the wind. Li Yi sighed. How long had it been since he had been so carefree? This was just a city at the border of the Qi kingdom, but it gave people a feeling that it was more prosperous than the capital of the Jing kingdom. After coming to the Qi kingdom, Li Yi deeply felt that it was not without reason that the Jing kingdom had been suppressed by them for so many years. Putting down the wine cup, he casually slapped away Mississippi Lu's hand that was reaching for the wine pot. He glanced at her and said, "My body hasn't recovered yet. I don't know if I can drink." "Just 1 cup." Mississippi Lu looked at him and said. "Not even 1 cup." Li Yi refused without hesitation. Mississippi Lu glared at him, but she did not insist. Li Yi looked at her with satisfaction. He felt a sense of accomplishment in his heart. Recently Mississippi Lu had become more and more obedient. If she could maintain this attitude after she recovered, how wonderful would life be? Next up is Miss Ying. Young Master Zhao presents her with 100 taels of silver. Qin presents her with 300 taels of silver. Young Master Yang presents her with a poem. Young Master Qian presents her with 1,000 taels of silver. The voices that came from downstairs from time to time always interrupted his daydream. Li Yi looked discontentedly at the high platform below. At this moment there was a new girl on the high platform. She was holding a pipa and playing it while performing difficult dance moves. It was very tempting. No wonder those young masters were giving her poems like crazy. In the blink of an eye, a few hundred taels of silver were already in her hands. All she had to do was twist her waist. Li Yi was very envious of her. If he had this kind of ability, he would not have to worry about money. Not long after the song ended, the duck-like voice called out again. Miss Ying invites young Master Yang upstairs for a chat. There was a sudden uproar below. Many people had just given silver tales of silver, but this Miss Ying just had to invite young Master Yang, who gave the poem, upstairs. It seemed that the poem had moved Miss Ying. Some people were envious while others sighed. Wealth was easy to come by, but talent was hard to come by. These famous prostitutes in Feng province were proficient in music, chess, calligraphy and painting. No matter which one of them, they could be crowned as a talented woman. Their daily contacts were all famous talents from all walks of life. They had never been interested in idiots who only knew how to throw money. "Why are you moved?" Mississippi Lu glanced at Li Yi and asked casually when she saw him looking down with an envious face. Li Yi nodded and said, "Yes, 1,000 taels of silver, but it didn't even make a splash. It's such a pity. If you gave it to us, you would have enough medicine for next month." Mississippi Lu was startled, then she shook her head and said, "Medicinal herbs are just auxiliary, it's not necessary." That being said, the sooner Mississippi Lu recovered, the sooner they could go back. Li Yi sighed, "You can't stop taking medicine." Below the pavilion, the topic of the crowd had shifted from Miss Ying to another woman on the stage. At this moment, the woman who was dancing to the music was also a famous prostitute in Feng province. In terms of fame, she was no less than the former. A slightly chubby young man dressed like a scholar and holding a folding fan in his hand sighed and turned away from the crowd. "Hey, isn't this the rich young master who throws money away? There are still a lot of programs later. Why did he leave so early?" Young Master Ying threw money away, but he still couldn't win Miss Ying's heart. "What a pity, what a pity," several voices came from the front. The slightly chubby young man looked up and saw a group of young people coming over. His expression changed slightly. "I don't want to cause trouble today. Get out of the way," he said in a low voice. Then he forcefully pushed the crowd aside and strode outside. He's just a guy who stinks of money. Why is he pretending to be a scholar? Does he really think that holding a folding fan makes him a scholar? He even wants to attract Miss Ying's attention. He's just a toad lusting for swan meat. He's just an idiot. If it weren't for his rich father, I'm afraid he wouldn't even be able to enter this place. Hearing the mocking voices coming from behind, the young man's body trembled. His face turned pale, but his footsteps became faster. Bullsh *T scholar. So what if he can write a few poems? At the entrance of the pavilion, the slightly chubby young man stood by the side of the road. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. Although he said so, his face was full of unwillingness and helplessness. He looked back again and was ready to leave. "What's wrong? Are you unwilling?" At this moment, an abrupt voice suddenly came from the dark alley beside him. The voice was full of temptation. The young man suddenly turned his head and looked into the darkness. He asked vigilantly, "Who is it?" Chapter 674. Who are you? Hearing the voice in the dark alley, the slightly plump young man took a few steps back. Looking at the figure in the dark, his gaze was still vigilant as he asked slowly, "It doesn't matter who I am." In the dark alley, the voice drifted, faintly discernible. "What's important is that I can help you." The young man asked suspiciously, "Help me with what?" The voice said leisurely, "So that you don't have to worry about not being able to write a good poem. You don't have to worry about not being able to get a girl. You don't have to worry about being mocked by those so-called scholars. Not being able to get a girl?" The man asked doubtfully. "No woman will care about you." The voice raised its pitch. The young man was stunned for a moment before realizing something. He blurted out, "You want to teach me how to write a poem?" This time the voice paused for a long time. "Do you think you're cut out for it?" "What do you mean?" The young man asked doubtfully. "It's very simple. You hand over the money and I hand over the poem. You hand over the money and I'll give you the poem. Once you hand over the money, the poem is yours. You can sign your name and use it however you want." The young man hesitated for a moment before saying, "How do I know you're not just casually writing a few sentences to trick me? Why do you have so many questions?" The voice in the dark became impatient. "Buy it if you want. If not, I'm leaving." "Wait a minute." Some images appeared in his mind. The young man clenched his fists. After his expression changed, he gritted his teeth and asked, "How much is your poem?" "Ranging from 100 taels to 10,000 taels. There are many prices and many choices. We can accept custom-made poems. Love between men and women, brotherly love, gay love, patriotism. Buy 5 get 1 free. Buy 10 get 3 free. The price is fair. The young man asked doubtfully, your poem can surpass that, Yang? If you just want to surpass that poem, I suggest you buy one that costs 100 taels. If you want to amaze the world and impress that Ying lady, 1,000 taels is enough. If you're willing to pay 10,000 taels, Zhou Xian will be nothing. In the future, you'll be the new poetry saint of the Qi kingdom. The voice was extremely fleeting and full of charm. It came from the dark. How about it? Do you want to consider it? I want 1,000 taels. After a moment of silence, there was a response from outside. Just a moment. Something seemed to move in the darkness. The young man seemed to hear a strange sound and then it went silent. After a quarter of an hour, a voice came from the darkness again. Then the young man saw a folded piece of paper being handed out from the darkness. He carefully walked over and reached out his hand. The piece of paper shrunk a little. He was taken aback for a moment, then he came back to his senses. He fumbled in his bosom for a while, then handed over a stack of paper and said, there's a total of 1,000 taels of silver here. You can exchange it for silver at any Qian's bank in the Qi kingdom. Aren't you afraid that I'll lie to you? After receiving the banknotes, the voice in the darkness came again. The slightly plump young man shook his head and said, it's only about 1,000 taels of silver. I'll have it if I save a day's allowance. There was no more sound in the darkness. He held the piece of paper and waited for a while. When he gathered his courage and walked into the alley, he found that there was no one there. Where did you go just now? After Li Yi returned upstairs and sat down, Mississippi Lu glanced at him and asked. I went downstairs to get some fresh air and bought some things. Li Yi put a bag of desserts on the table. He bought them from the shop where he borrowed pen and paper. They tasted pretty good. He had to admit that the guy just now was quite bold. He gave away 1,000 taels of silver without hesitation. Even when Li Yi was at his most prodigal, he didn't do this. He always gave 120,000 taels of silver to Mississippi Lu. He was a little thirsty after talking nonsense with that guy for a long time. The alcohol content here wasn't high, so it could be used as a drink to quench his thirst. Li Yi picked up the wine pot. Not a drop of wine was poured out. He looked at Mississippi Lu and gradually narrowed his eyes. It's getting late. I should go back and rest. Mississippi Lu stood up decisively and turned to walk downstairs. Li Yi walked down with a sullen face. When he walked out of the door, he brushed past a slightly chubby young man. Stop right there. Don't think that this matter will be over just like that. After a slight pause, he strode in the direction of Mississippi Lu. The young man looked back strangely, shook his head and turned around. After almost an hour, he walked into the attic again. In the hall, several young people dressed like scholars gathered together. They watched the program on the screen while whispering to each other. That guy with the surname Qian really thinks that he can buy anything with money. We don't want to be associated with such a vulgar person. That guy with the surname Qian is a joke. Let's not talk about him. Do you think that Miss Ying will be able to sleep with Yang Yanqing today? Impossible. Although Yang Yanqing has some talent in poetry, he's far behind his brother. I think Miss Ying is only doing this for that person's sake. Otherwise, I'm afraid she wouldn't be able to meet him today. I've long heard that Miss Ying is interested in that person. However, with her status, she's still too far behind. Maybe she's going to settle for the second best. It's also possible. After all, that person is appreciated by the third prince. Miss Ying is not worthy of him. A few people were chatting about some things when they were suddenly interrupted by a voice. Qian duo, young Master Qian, give Miss Xianxia a poem. In the past, when a lady performed on the stage, if there was a gift of money or a poem, someone would read it out loud to let everyone know. After all, many people did it for the sake of their reputation. If there was no splash of water, they might not do the same thing again in the future. Therefore, in such a place there would be someone in charge of this matter. Those who frequented this place were already used to it. However, this time when they heard this sentence, many people were stunned. This included the lady named Xianxia who was playing on the stage. Her pretty face was filled with astonishment, and her music was a little chaotic. They naturally knew who Qian Duo was. He was the famous young Master Qian in Fengzhou City. The Qian family's banks were opened all over the Qi kingdom. Their business was flourishing everywhere. In the entire Fengzhou City, there were not many families that were richer than the Qian family. The son of a businessman was looked down upon by others. He should have kept a low profile. However, this young Master Qian did not know how to keep a low profile at all. Usually, he boasted that he was a gifted scholar and often lingered in such places. He had spent a lot of money several times, but he did not even get to see the face of a lady. He had become a laughing stock in the eyes of the crowd. Everyone knew that this young Master Qian was a complete idiot. At this time he was learning from others to compose a poem. "Ha, young Master Qian, a poem. Read it, quickly read it out. Let us see what kind of masterpiece young Master Qian has." No, read it later. Let me laugh for a while." In an instant some people could not help but laugh out loud. The atmosphere in the hall became a little lively. In their eyes, young Master Qian knew how to compose a poem. It was no different from a rooster laying eggs or an iron tree blooming. It was simply a fantasy. At this moment the crowd only treated it as a joke. Hearing the various voices around him, Qian Duoduo's expression changed. He pretended to be indifferent, but his fists in his sleeves were already tightly clenched. He had read the poem just now. Although he could not see anything special about it, it was quite smooth to read. There was one word that he did not know. He only found out after asking someone. It should be better than that surnamed Yang, right? In the corner, there was a person holding a piece of paper in his hand. Under the urging of the crowd, he read it out loud. Kai Xiu attentively held the jade bell. That year she fought to be drunk and blushed. Dancing low in the willow house under the moon, she sang the wind at the bottom of the peach blossom fan. After parting, I remembered our meeting. How many times did my soul dream with you? Tonight, with only the silver lamp shining, I fear that our meeting is a dream. Those who could linger in this kind of place were mostly scholars. They usually boasted that they were outstanding and talented. Those they interacted with were all scholars. More or less they had some talent. Otherwise they would not have been able to fool the crowd. After that person read 2 lines, the mocking voices in the hall quieted down. Until the last line, "I fear that our meeting is a dream," was read out, there was no more noise. Countless people were stunned. They turned around to look at Qian Duoduo and swallowed their saliva in disbelief. Was this poem really written by that idiot Qian Duoduo? The woman on the stage was also stunned. She muttered a few lines and felt some kind of emotion. When she looked down the stage again, her eyes were a little hazy. At the door of a certain room upstairs, the woman called Yingying opened her mouth slightly. The man opposite her was also surprised. Even if Qian Duoduo did not understand poetry because of his background, his ability to observe people's expressions was far beyond that of ordinary people. Looking at the eyes and expressions of the people around him, he knew that the 1,000 taels he spent just now was really King worth it. Especially when he saw those so-called scholars, their expressions were as if they had seen a ghost. The carefree feeling in his heart was indescribable. He hummed a strange tune and walked out of the door alone under the stunned silence of the crowd. Just as he was about to walk out, he seemed to have thought of something. He turned around and walked to a table. The servant looked at him in a daze and asked, "Young Master Qian, is there anything else?" Qian Duoduo curled his lips and said, "That 1,000 taels of silver was wrong. Give it back to me. I can't control you, but your sister can. When I go back in a few days, I will tell her everything you did here one by one." There was still an hour before the curfew. The streets of Feng State City had already become sparse. Li Yi scolded as he walked. He did not hear a response for a long time. He looked back and saw that Mississippi Lu was already breathing evenly. He shook his head and sighed helplessly. "I can't control it anymore." The 3 words "fragrant forest garden" were vaguely visible under the illumination of the fireworks in the night sky. Chapter 675. Wearing a bamboo hat, Li Yi came out of the pharmacy with a lot of things in his hands. The fat man didn't lie to him last night. When he handed over the money to buy these herbs, the shop assistant accepted it without hesitation. Along the way he saw 2 banks on the street. The name of the bank was Bank. Seemed simple and crude, but it had a profound meaning. It was because it was opened by a big family surnamed Qian. When people talked about it, they would feel that all the banks in the world were their own homes. The Qian family was very famous in Fengzhou City because of their wealth. Fengzhou City was prosperous and there were many rich families. Some of them were new families and some were well-known families with deep heritage. The Qian family belonged to the former and it couldn't be more new. It was said that the master of the Qian family was originally a destitute laborer. However, he had unexpectedly made a fortune more than 10 years ago. He had started by unloading goods from ships. Then he had slowly started a small business. Step by step he had expanded his business. After 10 years, the wealth accumulated by the Qian family had surpassed most of the so-called rich and powerful families in Fengzhou City. Including those well-known families with decades of heritage, the wealth of the Qian family could be ranked in the top 5 in the entire Fengzhou City. In other words, the number of families in the entire Fengzhou City that were richer than the Qian family could be counted on one hand. Although power and money couldn't be separated since ancient times, the reality was that those with power had money, and those with money didn't necessarily have power. Especially in today's era, businessmen were lowly. The richer they were, the more they had to accept the ridicule and indifference of others. The Qian family was such an existence. They were different from those families that had accumulated wealth and reputation for hundreds of years. In the eyes of most people they were villains, landlords and nouveau riche. They weren't recognized by the upper class. Unlike the later generations, this kind of people were successful entrepreneurs, leading the trend of success studies, and idols in the hearts of countless confused youths. They could write books such as Qian Niji's Success Studies, The Law of Success, Chicken Soup for Success and so on. They could be sold out. This information was obtained by Li Yi from an insider. At that time the insider was blocked by him in the corner. He shouted, "Hero, please spare my life," and told him the story of the Qian family's prosperity. He even told him that the head of the Qian family kept a concubine in a small building, and that young Master Qian and a scholar were suspected to have a homosexual fetish. Before leaving, the insider sincerely suggested that if he wanted to rob the money he should go straight along this road and then turn left. The biggest and most luxurious mansion with a silver lion at the door should be the one. This was the information he politely inquired. As for yesterday's young Master Qian's wish, he didn't know yet. He didn't have many poems, but all of them were fine works. Yan Jidao's style of poetry was deep and profound, and he was good at expressing emotions. His achievements in literature were even higher than his father Yan Shu's, in both the current and future generations. Yan Jidao was someone who didn't even take Su Shi seriously. He didn't have many poems, but all of them were excellent. Due to the problems in his life, there were many poems in his poems that sympathized with the fate of prostitutes and dancers and praised their beautiful souls. His style was sad and touching. Which young girl doesn't yearn for love? Which young woman doesn't? Even prostitutes and dancers must have a lover in their hearts that they are looking forward to meeting. Because of their status, they yearn for beautiful things and feelings. Unfortunately, due to their status and age, most women can't obtain the happiness they hope for. If this emotional partridge sky were to be circulated, who knows how many women's hearts would be pierced. Li Yi didn't know if those women's hearts were pierced, but his own heart was pierced. With the help of medicinal materials, Mississippi Lu's body recovered quickly. This time he gritted his teeth and spent 500 taels of silver to buy medicinal materials of higher quality and older. If he could sell a few more poems, he and Mississippi Lu would soon be able to return home. Half of the 10 banknotes were gone in a short time. Rich people could only be found by chance. Li was a little regretful. He should have left his contact information yesterday. Although he knew where the Qian family was, he couldn't go to them with a mask like this. Wearing a bamboo hat and walking on the street, many people turned their heads. If it weren't for the fact that some people in Jianghu often dressed like this, people wouldn't be too surprised. Perhaps they would be invited to tea by the patrolling soldiers after a while. At a certain moment, a man wearing a bamboo hat walked into a deep alley. Not long after, a young man came out from the other side of the alley. Li looked at the sky. He had been delayed on the road today. He had to hurry back to cook for Mississippi Lu. Fonglin Garden was just ahead. When Li Yi walked over, he greeted Lin Yong, who was leaning against the door. He walked to a small courtyard and gently knocked on the door. Today Mississippi Lu took a long time to open the door. Li Yi looked at her suspiciously. He pointed at her face and asked, "What's wrong with you? Didn't you wash your face when you woke up this morning?" Mississippi Lu's expression was a little unnatural. She wiped her face with her sleeves and said, "Go wash your hands. It's time to eat." "You went out to buy food?" Li Yi walked into the house and said, "Didn't I say to wait for me to come back? Your body hasn't recovered yet." It's dangerous outside. He looked at the unknown object on the table and looked up at Mississippi Lu. He asked, "This? Where did you buy this food from? Eat it if you want." Mississippi Lu glanced at him and turned around to walk back to her room. Li Yi reached out his chopsticks and picked up the paste in front of him. He vaguely recognized that this should be green vegetables. As for the other plate, he could only say that he was not knowledgeable enough. He looked at the rice again. Forget it, he could not bear to look anymore. This was obviously the work of Mississippi Lu. No wonder her face was black and white just now. She was also wearing an apron around her waist. Other people were men who worked hard to earn money to support their families. When they returned home, the women had already prepared a table full of delicious food for them. Mississippi Lu was also waiting for him, waiting to poison him to death. Just as Li Yi was facing the unknown object on the table and was at a loss of what to do, Lin Yong walked in from the door with a smile and said, "Li brothers eating. Brother Lin, you haven't eaten yet, right?" Li Yi looked up at him and was stunned for a moment. He immediately said, "Sit down and eat with us." "This is so embarrassing." Lin Yong rubbed his hands and sat opposite Li Yi in embarrassment. He looked at Li Yi in surprise. He felt that the Li brothers seemed to be very friendly to him today. Li Yi handed him the chopsticks and said with a smile, "Don't stand on ceremony. I've made a lot of food today. Brother Lin, you can eat as much as you want." "Ah, then I won't stand on ceremony." Lin Yong took the chopsticks and laughed. He asked, "Where's the food? Is it not here yet?" "Li brothers, you sit down. I'll go get it." His eyes inadvertently swept across the table and asked in confusion, "What is this?" "This is it." Li Yi looked at him and said sincerely. "What is it?" Lin Yong looked confused. Li Yi pushed the two dishes over and said, "I've already eaten outside. Brother Lin, don't stand on ceremony. Do you want me to help you get 2 more bowls of rice?" Lin Yong lowered his head to take a look and finally realized something. His expression changed. I'm so embarrassed to eat here every day, Li brothers." Lin Yong put down the chopsticks and strode outside. He said apologetically, "I suddenly remembered that Miss was looking for me. I'll go and ask her first. It's okay." Lin Wanru came in from outside. She looked at him and said, "The shop is not too busy now. You eat your food. I have something to ask Li." She turned to look at Li Yi and said, "I wonder if it's convenient for Li to come over now?" Li Yi stood up and patted Lin Yong's shoulder. He said, "Brother Lin, food is precious. Don't waste it." Lin Yong stood up and looked down at the table. His face instantly turned pale. Chapter 676. In the courtyard, Lin Yong picked up his chopsticks, carefully picked up a piece of vegetable and put it into his mouth. He chewed twice, making crunching sounds. In the next moment, his expression changed drastically. He put down his chopsticks and rushed out of the door. On the other side, Li Yi followed Lin Wanru through Fonglin Park and came to a room behind the shop. Lin Wanru poured him a cup of tea and said, "Take a seat first. I'll go get the account book. There are a few places that I don't quite understand. The way you keep accounts is very special." Li Yi nodded and sat down at the table in the room. The layout of Fonglin Park was similar to that of Rui Square. At the front was a shop and at the back was a place for people to rest. There were not many furnishings in this room. There were tables, chairs, beds and cabinets. Everywhere was simple. The most eye-catching thing was the many calligraphy paintings hanging on the walls. Although they were called calligraphy paintings, they were actually just words. Li Yi knew that this Miss Lin was a person who loved calligraphy. The works hanging in her room were not the best, but they were of a certain standard. There were books on the table as well as some neatly stacked manuscripts. When Li Yi skimmed to the top page, he was slightly stunned. The reason why he was stunned was not only because this was the poem Partridge Sky that he had sold to the fat man yesterday, but also because this handwriting was Wang Shiji's semi-cursive script. The ink on the paper was still wet and it was clearly written not long ago. Women in this world, as long as they studied in primary school, would all use the hairpin-style small regular script. It was rare to see a semi-cursive script. He picked up the paper and looked at it doubtfully. "It's not a good imitation. Please excuse me." Lin Wanru's voice came from the side. She said, "In the Jing Kingdom, you should often see the handwriting of that #1 scholar. Otherwise you can't imitate it so well. Ever since Zhou Xian spread this handwriting, many people in the Qi Kingdom have begun to imitate it. I have to say, among these people, You are the best at imitating. Li Yi was stunned for a moment. He nodded and said, I see it quite often. Just a moment ago she was still puzzled. When he copied the poem yesterday he had used a different style of writing. After knowing her for so long she did not expect that this Miss Lin was also his fan. Life was really full of surprises. Li Yi pointed at the paper and asked, This poem? They said it came from Xianxia River last night. Zhou Xian hasn't had any poems recently. It's been a long time since I've seen such a good poem. Li Yi nodded and didn't ask any more questions. It seemed that the man wouldn't think that his money was wasted. As if she had thought of something, Lin Wanru asked again, The poems composed by that #1 scholar of yours have long spread throughout the Qi kingdom. Did he compose any new poems after that? I don't know much about poetry and I've never paid attention to it. Li Yi shook his head and said, You just said that you have questions for me? Lin Wanru also didn't continue this topic. She flipped open the account book and pointed at a certain part of it. She said, I'm still not clear about these accounts. Can you explain them to me? Of course. Li Yi nodded and shifted his gaze over. After about a quarter of an hour, Lin Wanru held a piece of paper in her hands that she had just calculated. After looking at it carefully for a few times she carefully put it away. At the same time in the small courtyard that was separated by a wall, Li Yi put on his apron and glanced at Mississippi Lu. He said, There's no time to cook. There's still some white rice left from yesterday. Let's make do with egg-fried rice for breakfast. The heavens had given her the face of an angel. With the strength of a devil she had to collect some commission somewhere else. In this life he didn't expect Mississippi Lu to cook. Li Yi was already very pleased that she had the intention to do so. In the afternoon the man named Lin Yong didn't come over for a free meal. He only went out for a stroll like he did yesterday. After eating he would exercise a little and sleep with Mississippi Lu after the sun set. They slept separately. He didn't know if practicing the tortoise breathing technique had any healing effects. However, at least he could fall asleep immediately when he was bored. From then on he wouldn't have to suffer from insomnia anymore. Li Yi turned off the light and looked at the other side of the room that was separated by a piece of cloth. He slowly closed his eyes when he heard the sound of even breathing coming from the other side. The small courtyard quickly fell into silence. Outside the courtyard, the place a few streets away gradually became noisy. No matter which city it was, the most prosperous and noisy place would always be the red light district. The Xianxia River passed through Feng State City. There were many lofts on both sides of the river. Although it was also a place of pleasure, it was slightly more classy. Most of them didn't engage in the naked business of sex. Instead they were scholars, singers, dancers, lovers and happy things. Although Feng State City was remote, it was far away from the war. The people lived in peace. Both sides of the Xianxia River were naturally jubilant tonight. In a small building somewhere the famous prostitute of Feng State Hu Yingying was performing on stage. She was performing her famous skill, the rebound pipa. In the entire Feng State she was the only one who could perform this kind of dance to the extreme. Hu Yingying also relied on this unique skill to look down on all the other beauties and become the star of this small building. In the past, every time she performed the rebound pipa, there would be no empty seats. However, today, although there were many people below the stage, it was far less than in the past. Among the whispers of the people below, the words Young Master Qian would occasionally appear. Everyone here knew that young Master Qian was interested in Hu Yingying. However, Miss Hu Yingying, who was famous in Feng State, naturally looked down on that fat guy who reeked of money. Even though he had spent a lot of money several times, she still accepted the money and never asked to meet him alone. This kind of thing was very normal. However, yesterday the ignorant and incompetent young Master Qian actually got a good poem from somewhere and gave it to another lady in the building. Not only that, but he also took back the 1,000 taels of silver that he gave to Hu Yingying. If it was in the past, this kind of behavior would naturally attract ridicule from the crowd. However, yesterday they couldn't laugh at all. That was because the poem was really beyond their expectations. The whole poem was only about 50 words, but it vividly expressed the first alliance, separation and reunion between a man and a woman. Writing about sorrow, writing about joy, they were all so sincere and deep that they could shake one's heart. His words were the voice of one's heart. Only a person with true feelings could write such poems. To be able to write such poems, one must also be a person with true feelings. Of course, No one believed that the person who was deeply in love was rich young Master Qian Duo. He was probably annoyed by Hu Yingying and bought poems to give to others. Then he asked for the money back in order to humiliate her. He had to admit that he had achieved his goal. That sincere poem really touched many people, especially evoking some emotions in the hearts of many singers and dancers. Overnight it spread across both sides of Qingshui River. The most discussed topic was the poem written by young Master Qian. Where did he buy it from? Hu Yingying lost face and her popularity plummeted. On the other hand, the girl named Shi's popularity rose by a large margin. In a single night she replaced Hu Yingying and became the most popular girl here. Even if Hu Yingying used her famous skills tonight, she still couldn't turn the tide. The phrase, "I'm afraid that we'll meet again in a dream," made many girls cry. Although they despised young Master Qian Duoduo's behavior of buying the poem, they couldn't blame him for seeing such an excellent piece of work. Instead, there were people who tried to find out who wrote the poem. However, young Master Qian Duo insisted that he was the one who wrote the poem and refused to budge. Many people had no choice but to leave. I should have bought 100 taels of silver. That night on the street beside the river, a slightly plump young man stood at the entrance of an alley. He paced anxiously as he muttered to himself. Initially he thought that by throwing the poem out he would be able to shock everyone and let Hu Yingying see that he was a real talent. Then he would turn around and leave, regaining all the dignity that he had lost in the past. However, who would have thought that he would achieve his goal? Early this morning the Qian family's doorstep was almost trampled through. In the end he couldn't take it anymore and ran out from the back door. Only then did he barely escape the calamity. At this moment he finally knew that after telling the first lie he would have to use countless lies to cover it up. The brother in the dark indeed didn't lie to him. A poem worth 1,000 taels of silver was indeed worth 1,000 taels of silver. He decided to buy one worth 10,000 taels of silver first. In the future, if he saw any lousy scholar that he didn't like, he would use the poem to smash them to death. A figure walked out of the alley. Qian Duo immediately went up and asked anxiously, "Brother, is that you?" The man who walked out of the alley was stunned for a moment. Then he said angrily, "How dare you scold my mother?" While Qian Duo was stunned, a fist swung over from the front. Note: in ancient Chinese there are also terms for father and mother. These two terms have existed since ancient times and are not foreign words. In ancient times, mother did not necessarily refer to a brothel keeper. I suddenly remembered that I wrote an empty poem. What's the point of explaining this? To make up the number of words? Chapter 677. Bang. Qian Duo kicked the man into the alley. He curled his lips and said, "Do you really think that the 2 kilograms of meat on my body are just for show? If you want to fight with me, go back and eat for a few more years." He clapped his hands and turned around to look at the bustling street. A vexed expression appeared on his face as he murmured, "Brother, where the hell are you?" Bang. In a certain room in the attic, a woman named Hu Yingying fiercely threw her pipa to the ground. Her face was filled with anger as she coldly said, "Surnamed Qian, you've gone too far. Okay, you still have the face to talk about others?" The madam stood behind her and glanced at her. She said, "How many times do I have to tell you not to be too unsightly when you eat? You don't even try to win over your sugar daddy. Instead you flirt with those poor scholars all day. How do you think you so-called famous courtesans came to be? It's all because of money. This time I'll teach you a lesson. All of you be more careful." Hu Yingying said with a straight face, "But, no buts." The madam waved her hand and said, "Find time to properly apologize to young Master Qian. Let me tell you, if you have the surname Qian in the future, you'll enjoy endless glory and wealth. The money that old Master Qian spills out from between his fingers is enough to buy this entire building. I might even have to listen to your face. Tell me what's so good about those poor scholars. If you follow them, you deserve to suffer for the rest of your life." Hu Yingying gritted her teeth and didn't say anything else. The madam glanced at her and walked out of the room. When she reached the door, she turned around and said, "Don't tell me that you're still thinking about that person. Let me give you a piece of advice. Give up. You're just a prostitute, you can't reach his level." Hu Yingying raised her head and gritted her teeth. She said, "Yingying understands. Afraid that we'll meet again in a dream." "Xuan, do you think this poem was really written by that young Master Qian?" In a luxurious mansion in Feng State City, A white-clothed youth recited a few lines and raised his head to look at the young man in front of him. Regardless of whether he is or not, I have to meet this young Master Qian. Zhou Xian, who had been writing, put down his brush and looked at the partridge sky that he had recopied onto the paper. He said, "It's not important whether he bought this poem or not. What's important is where he bought it from. I'm more interested in someone who can write such a poem. Don't you find it strange, Yanzhou? Becoming famous overnight is a little strange." Yang Yanzhou nodded and said, "The style of the poem is unique. It's unlike anyone I know. Although the theme is nothing more than sadness and resentment, feelings and nostalgia, it's tactful and delicate. It's also romantic and charming. It's fresh and handsome. I really can't think of anyone else in Feng Province or even the Qi Kingdom who has such a standard." He looked at Zhou Xian and said, "If you didn't deny it just now, I really would have thought that this was one of your hobbies." "I don't have the leisure to do that," Zhou Xian said with a smile. "However, that young Master Qian is the son of the God of Wealth. It doesn't seem to be easy. The God of Wealth will probably give you face." Yang Yanzhou shook his head and then looked at him again. He said, "I heard from the third prince that person seems to have come to the Qi Kingdom. Do you know who?" Zhou Xian raised his head and asked in confusion. "Li Yi," Yang Yanzhou said looking at him. Zhou Xian was stunned and slowly stood up from the chair. "Are you sure you found out everything?" On a street somewhere in Feng Province, the young man stopped and looked at a shop in front of him and asked again. The servant behind him immediately replied, "Young master, I found out everything. The scholar came back from the Jing Kingdom with Miss Lin. Seems that they were in trouble. They have an injured wife with them. They live in the courtyard next to Fonglin Garden." The young man nodded and said, "Let's go." Li Yi walked out of the courtyard and saw Lin Yong at the gate of Fonglin Garden. He said casually, "Brother Lin, have you eaten? Do you want to come in and eat?" Growl. Hearing the word eat, Lin Yong's stomach growled. He looked up at Li Yi and shook his head. He said righteously, "No need, no need. I've eaten outside just now. Thank you for your kindness, Li brothers." Mississippi Lu suffered another blow. She probably wouldn't cook for a while. However, it seemed that she had left a big shadow in Lin Yong's heart. He had obviously only tasted one bite yesterday and regarded that courtyard as a dragon's pool and a tiger's den. Back then he had eaten all the food she made. In the end he still went back and brought Lin Yong a serving of rice. After tasting it, the mountain-like man was moved to tears. Just as Li Yi was about to go back, he heard noises coming from the shop. Inside Fonglin Garden, the man surnamed Bai looked at Lin Wanru and said with a bitter smile, "Wanru, think about it again. 10,000 taels of silver is not a low price. My father likes Liuli the most. I really can't think of a good gift to give him for his birthday." Lin Wanru shook her head and said, "I'm sorry. The flying swallow horse is the treasure of Fonglin Garden. It's not for sale." "I know it's a bit difficult." The man surnamed Bai looked troubled and said, "But I also want my father to be happy. Otherwise I definitely wouldn't ask. I'm really sorry. I can't make the decision alone." Lin Wanru still shook her head. Not long after, the man surnamed Bai walked out of the shop. After glancing at Li Yi, he shook his head and turned to leave. Li Yi thought about it and walked into the shop. He saw Lin Wanru standing in front of the Liuli ware. He walked over and looked at her. After hesitating for a moment, he said, "Miss Lin, if you can sell this Liuli ware, it's better to sell it as soon as possible." "Why?" Lin Wanru looked at him and asked with a frown. Li Yi pointed at the Liuli ware and said, "There are some foreign merchants who claim to be from Great Britain. They traveled over land and water to bring a large amount of Liuli ware here. This thing will soon be worthless. So it's better to sell it as soon as possible." "How do you know?" Lin Wanru looked at him and asked. "It's a coincidence. I saw them in the Jing Kingdom before. It won't be long before they reach the Qi Kingdom." Li Yi could only say so much. Any more would involve business secrets. It was not easy for the British merchants. They traveled thousands of miles, traveled over land and water, and lost a lot of people. It was not easy for them to come here. He had to give them a way out. Watching him leave, Lin Wanru's face showed a thoughtful expression. When she looked at the flying swallow again, her eyes changed a little. "Great Britain? A foreign merchant?" Lin Wanru's face showed a thoughtful expression. "I've never heard of this foreign country. Is it rich in Liuli ware?" Chongzhou and Fengzhou were neighbors. If one rode a fast horse, it would take a day's journey from Fengzhou to the border of the Qi kingdom. After crossing the river from Chongzhou, one would reach the territory of the Jing kingdom. In a shop in Fengzhou city, the shop assistant scratched his head in confusion and asked, "Where did you say you came from? I didn't hear you clearly. Say it again." At this time, there were a few men in ragged clothes with unkempt hair and dirty faces. The man in the front looked at him and said arrogantly, "Listen carefully. We come from the great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. We have a big business with you. Hurry up and ask your shopkeeper to come out." "What are you doing?" The shop assistant looked at them with disdain. He waved his hand and said impatiently, "A bunch of stinky beggars. You want to ask our shopkeeper to come out? Hurry up and get lost. If you don't, I'll let the dogs bite you." The man in the front turned around and gave another man a look. The man immediately opened a big box on the ground. In an instant the whole shop was lit up. The shop assistant looked at the box with his mouth wide open. He was stunned. After a while he shouted and ran to the back. "Shopkeeper, come out quickly." Chapter 678. Qian Duo had been distressed for the past 2 days. The poem Partridge in the Sky, and the phrase, "I'm afraid we'll meet in a dream," had spread his name throughout the entire Feng State City. Although his name was well known in Feng State City before this, the meaning was very different. Foppish idiot prodigal. This was what people thought of him before. Foppish idiot prodigal poem seller. This was what people thought of him now. He needed to prove himself and prove that he didn't buy the poem. He wasn't an idiot. He just didn't want others to know about it. However, the brother who sold him the poem had disappeared. The other party appeared mysteriously and disappeared mysteriously. He hadn't appeared since that night. It was as if the other party had appeared to save him that day. He didn't know the brother's name or appearance. The only clue he had was that alley. Therefore he asked his father to buy the restaurant across the alley the next day. At this time he was sitting in the restaurant's lobby. From time to time he would look outside. If he saw someone stopping at the alley he would go out and ask them. However, it had been 2 days and he still hadn't seen the person he was looking for. Sigh. He sighed as he walked out of the alley again and returned to the restaurant. Li Yi leaned against the wall outside a shop. Occasionally he would look inside and be cut by the gazes of the 2 women at the door. He looked up and saw that the sign of Rui Workshop was very eye-catching. He couldn't help but feel a bit depressed. He didn't know which bastard had copied the style of his own underwear, but he had even copied the name of the shop. Not only did he plagiarize, but he also didn't want to let him in. Mississippi Lou was injured. If something happened to her inside, he wouldn't be able to help her in time. He had brought Mississippi Lou out to shop during the day to buy some clothes and daily necessities. She had been in the underwear shop for a quarter of an hour. It seemed like she wouldn't be able to come out anytime soon. Li Yi leaned against the wall in boredom. He looked at the people coming and going on the street. When his eyes swept across a certain alley, he was slightly stunned. Sigh, did she leave Feng State? Qian Duo walked out of the alley again and sighed. When he was about to enter the restaurant, he suddenly heard a voice coming from the alley behind him. "Are you satisfied with the poem?" Hearing the familiar voice, Qian Duo stopped in his tracks. He immediately turned around and said, "Brother, you're here." The voice just now came from inside the alley. He quickly walked into the alley, and when he was halfway there, the voice sounded again. "All right, just stop there." Qian Duo immediately stopped in his tracks and looked at the corner of the alley, where a corner of a shirt could be seen. "Are you satisfied with the words?" The voice rang out again. "Yes, I'm very satisfied." Qian Duo nodded fiercely. He had never bought such a valuable thing in his life. Now that he recalled the expressions of those people that night, he felt so happy that he wanted to shout out loud. "As long as you're satisfied. I'm leaving." When the voice rang out again, a copper coin flew out from the corner of the alley. Received a good review, returned 1 coin. Qian Duo caught the copper coin, and after being stunned for a moment, his expression changed. He quickly took a few steps forward and then seemed to remember something. He stopped and anxiously said, "Brother, please wait." A moment later, a voice came from the other side. "Is there anything else?" A smile appeared on Qian Duo's face as he said, "I wonder if brother still has poems for sale?" The voice paused and asked, "How many songs do you want?" 10 songs. Just like before, 10,000 taels of silver. According to your rules, buy 5 and get 1 free, buy 10 and get 3 free. That's a total of 13 songs. Are there any special requirements? Just like the previous song. Love between a man and a woman. Qian Duo nodded vigorously. Yes, that's it. The person on the other side did not speak immediately, as if he was thinking. After a while, the voice sounded again. Pay a deposit of 5,000 taels first, and the item you want will be delivered to you by tonight. Qian Duo took out a stack of banknotes from his pocket. After splitting them in half, he walked to the corner of the room and carefully handed them over. 5,000 taels. Aren't you afraid that I'll run away with the money? Li Yi leaned against the wall and asked. I trust you, brother. The voice came from the other side. Besides, it's only 5,000 taels, but 5 days' worth of pocket money? Li Yi waved his hand and said, wait at the entrance of the alley before it gets dark. Thank you, brother. Qian Duo beamed with joy and asked again, may I know your name, brother? Then, as if he remembered something, he immediately said, I'm sorry I broke the rules. Brother, please don't blame me. It's fine. The voice was very straightforward this time. Fine, I won't change my name or my surname. Just call me Li Han. Where did you go? When Li Yi walked back, Mississippi Lu was standing in front of the underwear store, holding 2 exquisite bags in her hands as she looked at him and asked. Just walking around. Li Yi took the bags from her hands and said, let's go and take a look in front. Catch him quickly. As soon as he said that, an anxious voice came from behind. A figure ran past Li Yi at lightning speed, followed by a middle-aged fat man who was panting heavily. When the fat man ran to Li Yi's side, he finally could not run anymore. With one hand on his waist, he shouted weakly, catch the thief, catch the thief. It's you? Li Yi looked at the middle-aged fat man and asked in surprise. The fat man only glanced at him, took a moment to catch his breath and continued to run forward. Li Yi shook his head. The jade pendant given to him by the old emperor had only been sold for 1,000 taels of silver to this fatty. To think that this fellow would end up like this. From the looks of it, the thief must have stolen something valuable from him. Let's go. The thief had already disappeared. Li Yi looked at Mississippi Lu. There was still a ready-made clothing store in front. They would go there for a while before going home to cook. In front, the middle-aged fat man held his waist and said to a constable, the money bag has been stolen. There's also a piece. He paused for a moment. It's the money bag has been stolen. Chase. The constable looked at the direction he was pointing at, waved his hand and immediately chased after the thief with the other constables behind him. In a dilapidated alley somewhere. Today's harvest is not bad. A man waved to the 2 people beside him as if he was showing off. There's actually so much silver. After saying that, he spread out his other hand and said, there's also a piece of broken jade. I don't know how much it's worth. Let's find a place to pawn it tomorrow. Not long after, the few people came out of the alley with satisfaction and bumped into a person who was walking towards them. Damn, are you blind? It's you again. The man looked at the man who bumped into him and grabbed him by the collar, mocking, why didn't you ask me if I've heard of your Patian Empress today? Protector, it's him. The man pulled on the man's clothes and said loudly. As soon as he said that, more than 10 figures rushed out from a nearby house. The person in front was a man in blue. At this moment he was looking at the few people with gloomy eyes. He waved his hand and said, arrest them. The yellow-clothed people behind him rushed forward. Damn, there's actually an accomplice. The man's expression changed and he kicked away the man who was grabbing his clothes. The 2 people beside him had already reacted and madly ran forward. Chase. The man in blue ordered. Everyone immediately responded and chased in the direction that the 3 people had escaped in. Damn, I'm dead tired. Not long after, the man and the 2 people stood on the street, bent over and panting heavily. At this point, those people finally didn't dare to chase them anymore. Tired? If you're tired, then take a rest. A voice came from behind. The man suddenly turned around and saw that the constable had placed a knife on his neck. Immediately, other constables came over and locked the 3 people together. Why don't you come with us? The leading constable waved his hand, and a few constables carried the 3 dejected people towards the direction of the yamen. Chapter 679. You can decide what to do with this case. I'm going to sleep for a while. Somewhere in Fengzhou City, the county magistrate yawned and waved his hand to the bailiffs. He then leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He was getting old and his body couldn't take it anymore. Yesterday he had fought with his new concubine until dawn, but now he couldn't take it anymore. Yes, Your Excellency. The bailiff cupped his hands and bowed. Tell me, how many times have you done this? He walked down and patted the man's face. The big man sighed and said, I can't count. You have hands and feet. You can do anything. Why do you have to steal and rob? The bailiff looked at him and said, Now that you're out, find some serious work. Don't let me see you in the county jail again. Alas, life is hard. The big man sighed and said in a melancholy tone, It's impossible to work. I'm not born for this. If I don't steal and rob, I'll starve to death. The bailiff slapped his head and waved his hand saying, Take him away. See if there's anything missing. Another bailiff pulled a bag of money from the big man's body and threw it to the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man opened the bag and looked inside. His face was gloomy. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, There's nothing missing. He couldn't tell anyone about the jade pendant that he had planned to trade in the black market. Although it would cost him nearly 10,000 taels of silver, it was a crime that could get him beheaded for hiding an item belonging to the royal family. He couldn't let the government know about it. Fortunately, the big man had already thrown away the jade pendant. Although he was distressed about the money, he didn't feel so bad when he thought that it was from a guy who didn't know how to pawn it for 1,000 taels of silver. What a pity. He had originally planned to pay him more if he came to redeem it in the future. However, most of the things that were pawned in the pawnshop were equivalent to being sold. The possibility of redeeming them was very small. If he was lucky, he could make a net profit of 10,000 taels of silver. Although his heart ached taking a step back compared to his life, none of this seemed that important. The burly man was being escorted by 2 bailiffs. Just as he was about to leave, he seemed to have thought of something. He stopped and said, That's right, there's also a jade pendant. Since it's not worth much money, you can take it back as well. That way you won't be able to say that I hid it from you. The burly man cupped his waist and said, It's here. Brother Constable, help me take it. Hearing this, the middle-aged man's expression changed greatly. He immediately said, Nonsense, I only lost my purse. How can there be any jade pendant? You stole it from someone else. You must have remembered wrongly. The burly man was stunned for a moment. He looked at the middle-aged man and said, Don't tell me you're confused. You lost your jade pendant and forgot about it. Or, you really want to postpone it and make me suffer a few more beatings. The middle-aged man forced himself to calm down and said, Nonsense. Why would I harm you? Do you think I don't know if I lost the jade pendant or not? The burly man turned to look at the bailiff and said, Brother Constable, this guy may have really forgotten that the jade pendant is on my waist. Help me take it. He should remember it when he sees it. The bailiff looked at the 2 of them and felt a little surprised. He felt something from the bulge on the burly man's waist. Crack. The sound of porcelain shattering and tables and chairs overturning came from behind. The county magistrate didn't even bother to pat the dust off his body. He got up from the ground and ran in the direction of the door. He looked at the burly man and pointed at the jade pendant. He asked in shock, This jade pendant, where did you get it? The burly man was stunned for a moment and looked at the middle-aged man in astonishment. At this moment, the purse in the middle-aged man's hand had fallen to the ground. His face was pale. Plop. His legs turned to jelly. He knelt on the ground and cried, Sir, please spare my life. Tell me the truth. The county magistrate said sternly. Not long after, the county magistrate hurriedly walked out of the county office. He got on the sedan chair and urged, Go to King Feng's mansion. King Feng's mansion was a very special existence in Feng province. The highest official in Feng province was the provincial governor. But in fact, it was King Feng's mansion that managed Feng province. This was a special case in the Qi kingdom. Although many princes had fiefs, most of them were remote territories. They only enjoyed rent and lived a good life, but they didn't have any real power. However, the 3rd prince Zhou Yi was not one of them. Among the more than 10 princes in the Qi kingdom, he was the only one who had a fief as large as a prefecture and could personally manage the government affairs. He had the power to make some important decisions. The 3rd prince Zhou Yi had come to the fief when he was young. It took him more than 10 years to turn a medium-sized prefecture into one of the richest places in the Qi kingdom. Not only did he have a high status in the hearts of the people in Feng province, but he also had a great influence in the neighboring prefectures. At this moment in King Feng's mansion, the prestigious third prince had just put down a letter. Down below, Yang Yanzhou frowned and asked, "Your Highness, why has the first prince suddenly come to Feng prefecture?" "Why?" Zhao Yi looked out of the window and said, "The imperial censor is accompanying him. He said he's inspecting the prefectures on behalf of my father. He'll arrive in Feng province in a few days." Yang Yanzhou thought about it and said, "The first prince won't leave the capital easily. He's not here with good intentions. Your Highness, you should be prepared. This brother of mine." Zhao Yi sighed. Her tone was rather helpless as she said, "Is there still no news from Chong province?" Yang Yanzhou nodded and said, "Not yet. However, according to the news from the Jing kingdom, it seems that they haven't found him either. There are rumors that he might have met with misfortune." Zhao Yi shook his head and said, "That won't happen. Such a person died because of this, then God must be blind. I believe that we'll meet again one day." Yang Yanzhou didn't say anything. Thinking of that name, some scenes emerged in his mind, and his expression became somewhat enlightened. After a long time, Lili was still as elegant as before. The two talked for a while and then a servant outside the door reported, "The county magistrate of Feng City requests to see you." "Greetings, Your Highness." The county magistrate of Feng City hurriedly came in and bowed to Zhao Yi. "County Magistrate Wu, you don't have to be so courteous. Sit down." Zhao Yi raised his hand and said, "May I know why County Magistrate Wu suddenly came to visit?" County Magistrate Wu respectfully presented a jade pendant with both hands and said, "Your Highness, this jade pendant was accidentally obtained from several bandits today." Yang Yanzhou was surprised. He looked at Zhao Yi and said, "Your Highness, isn't this the one that His Majesty rewarded you? It's the Huilong pendant." Zhao Yi took the jade pendant from County Magistrate Wu's hands and smiled. "He's here." Coming. Li Yi hurriedly walked into the kitchen. If he was a step late, he would have to make do with egg fried rice today. Mississippi Lu seemed to have made up her mind this time. She wouldn't stop until she made a dish that could be swallowed. She just felt pity for the ingredients that she had just thrown away as garbage. Some of them were really expensive. Thinking of the 5,000 taels of silver he had just received, he didn't feel so distressed. Out of the 10,000 taels of silver, he had to keep 1,000 taels of silver. When he left, he would redeem the jade pendant. If the old emperor remembered it one day, he couldn't use the excuse that the proud Lolita had lost it every time to fool him. Thinking of the jade pendant, he thought of the stingy pawnshop manager. The value of that jade pendant was certainly more than 1,000 taels of silver. But last time he was in urgent need of money, so he was forced to cheat him. He had always cheated people, and those who cheated him would sooner or later suffer retribution. This was not the second time they met, and he had already lost something important. The next time they met, he would probably lose his head. Therefore it was better to be upright. The heavens were watching, and it was not easy for him to hold on to the integrity of his heart. When the smell of burning came from the kitchen of the small courtyard again, in the prison of the county government, the pawnshop manager knelt on the ground and kept kowtowing. He said in a trembling voice, He was wearing a bamboo hat that day. I really didn't know his identity." Chapter 680. In the county jail, Zhao Yi, the third prince of the Qi kingdom, looked at the pawnbroker and asked, "Half a month ago he wore a bamboo hat and pawned this jade pendant for 1,000 taels of silver?" "Yes, he used a bamboo hat to cover his face, so I didn't see what he looked like, nor did I know who he was." The pawnbroker said in a trembling voice, "Everything I said is true. If there is any falsehood, may I be struck by lightning." Not long after, Zhao Yi came out of the cell, shook his head and said, "This dragon pendant was given to me by my father. It is worth 10,000 taels of gold, but I pawned it for 1,000 taels of silver. Brother Li, you look down on me too much." Yang Yanzhou stood beside him, thought for a moment and said, "Your Highness, if that's the case, he should be in Fengzhou City now." Zhao Yi nodded and said, "He must know the value of this jade pendant, but he pawned it for only 1,000 taels of silver. He must be extremely short of money. He can't go back to the Jing kingdom for the time being, so it's normal for him to hide in the Qi kingdom. He shouldn't have left at this time." Your Highness, who are you looking for? Do you want me to send someone? County Magistrate Wu hesitated for a moment and said. Zhou Yi waved his hand and said, No need, you don't need to ask about this matter. Remember to let the pawnbroker go later. County Magistrate Wu was stunned and said, Your Highness, it's a big crime to hide a royal item. Are you going to let him go like this? Zhou Yi smiled and said, It doesn't matter, just do as I said. County Magistrate Wu looked up at him and finally nodded and said, Your Highness, I understand. As they walked out of the county office, Yang Yanzhou turned around and asked, Your Highness, what if he doesn't redeem the jade pendant? Zhou Yi looked at the endless stream of people on the street and said, It's good that he went to redeem it, but it's expected that he didn't. Send more people to investigate in secret these days. Feng State City is not big, so if he is still in the city we will find him sooner or later. Yang Yanzhou nodded and the two of them walked down the stairs. At the same time, in a courtyard a few streets away, Li Yi scratched his head in confusion. Although he had never paid much attention to the gifts bestowed by the old emperor, he still had some impression of them. Until now he still couldn't remember when the old emperor had given him that jade pendant. After a while he still had no clue. He shook his head and stopped thinking about these things. He had to quickly write out the 13 poems and then go out to buy groceries. All the vegetables at home had been ruined by Mississippi Lu. He had to buy some new ones and send the poem to her to get the remaining 5,000 taels of silver. After this he would never sell his poems for money again. Not only Su Shi, Li Bai and Qin Guan but also Lu Yong and Yan Jidao. Every time they wrote a sentence, Li Yi could feel the strong resentment from a different time and space. It's a disgrace, it's really a disgrace. It was not dark yet. Qian Duo stood at the entrance of the alley waiting patiently. Only when night fell and his feet were about to go numb from standing, did a voice finally come from the alley. Money in one hand, goods in another. Did you bring the silver? Qian Duo was shocked and immediately said, Yes. Something flew out of the darkness. Qian Duo reached out and caught it. He heard the voice say, Here are 5 poems. You can check them first. Qian Duo walked to the side and opened it with the light of the lamp. There were a few words that he didn't know, but it should be the real thing. He walked back and handed a stack of banknotes in and said, This is the remaining 5,000 taels of silver. Brother, please count it. As soon as he finished speaking, he felt that his hand was empty. After a while, another roll of paper flew out. Money and goods are settled. Goodbye. Hearing the voice coming from the alley, Qian Duo hurriedly said, Brother, please wait. The voice said, Is there anything else? Qian Duo scratched his head and said, Cash back. Do you want a copper coin? Even a copper coin is money. Qian Duo smiled embarrassedly and said, My father taught me since I was a child that every porridge and meal is hard-earned. I shouldn't spend money recklessly and should be thrifty. Even a copper coin is money. I deserve it. Why don't I want it? This time the voice was silent for a long time before it spoke again. Sorry, there is no cash back this time. I used up my change when I bought vegetables just now. Buying vegetables. Qian Duo was stunned and looked ahead in surprise. However, there was no more sound coming from the darkness. Brother, remember that you still owe me a copper coin. Qian Duo shouted to himself. He carefully put away the poems and strode back. As Li Yi walked on the street, he thought that he should have spared him a celery or something. He didn't like to owe people money. Even a copper coin was still a debt. For someone with obsessive-compulsive disorder, there was not much difference between a copper coin and 10,000 taels of silver. When he passed by a city gate, he saw the soldiers at the gate questioning passers-by in the dark. They seemed to be holding something like a portrait in their hands. They were probably chasing after some felons. It seemed that the public security in Fengzhou was not very good. It was better to be careful while walking alone on the street at night. The right thing to do was to go back and sleep with Mississippi Lu. In a restaurant, several dancers were dancing gracefully on a high stage. One of them had a slim figure and graceful movements, which attracted the attention of most people in the hall. A young man raised the wine glass in his hand and looked at Qian Duo as he said, Brother Qian, Miss Shi thanked you in front of everyone that day. It's a pity that you left early. Otherwise, something wonderful would have happened between you and Miss Shi that day. Don't you plan to seize the opportunity today? Qian Duo waved his hand and said, I just saw Miss Shi that day and couldn't help but compose a poem. There is no other meaning. Brother Qian is very talented. Your reputation has spread throughout Fengzhou. I admire you. A person cupped his hands and said, we have known each other for more than 10 years, but I didn't know that Brother Qian had such a talent for poetry. Brother Qian, you have hidden it well. The people around him were all friends that he had known for a long time. They were not like those pedantic scholars who only knew how to mock him. Qian Duo smiled and said, don't be arrogant, don't be arrogant. I am very low-key. One of them revealed an indignant expression and said, there are actually people who say that Brother Qian's poems were bought. Even Zhou Xian acknowledged Brother Qian's works and admitted that it would be difficult for him to surpass them. In the state of Qi, is there anyone who is more talented than him? Could it be that Brother Qian bought a poem from Zhou Xian? Yes, such a poem is probably a priceless treasure. How could it be bought with money? Another person agreed. Qian Duo shook his head and said in a low voice, there is no such thing as a priceless treasure in this world. If 100 taels of silver isn't enough, 1,000 taels of silver is enough. If 1,000 taels of silver isn't enough, 1,000 taels of silver is enough. There has to be a price that matches it. I think that poem is only worth 1,000 taels of silver. Someone asked doubtfully, those poor people value their moral integrity more than their lives. Can this kind of poem be bought with money? Qian Duo smiled and said, there is nothing in this world that cannot be bought with money. If there is, it means that you did not pay enough. Someone asked in surprise, Brother Qian, do you mean that you bought that poem? Of course not. Qian Duo shook his head and said, I can easily write a dozen of those poems. Do I need to buy it? You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.